Snow falls steadily on the empty train platform as 28-year-old Emma Carter sits on a cold metal bench, her blue nurse uniform providing little protection against the bitter winter wind. She has been waiting for over 2 hours for a train that has been delayed indefinitely due to the storm, and her thin jacket is no match for the freezing temperatures that seem to cut straight through to her bones. Emma clutches her small purse tightly against her chest, its meager contents representing all she has left in the world. Inside her coat pocket, she fingers a crumpled eviction notice, a stark reminder that she has nowhere to return to tonight. 3 months of unpaid rent had finally caught up with her, and now all her belongings sit in snow-covered boxes on the sidewalk outside her former apartment. Her phone died hours ago, leaving her isolated in the growing storm. The platform lights flicker ominously as Emma shivers, watching her breath form small clouds in the frigid air. She had just finished a grueling 16-hour shift at Metropolitan General Hospital, where her work as a pediatric nurse barely pays enough to cover her tiny studio apartment. Today had been particularly difficult. She'd saved a young boy from anaphylactic shock only to return home and discover the locks changed on her apartment door. Emma closes her eyes, trying to hold back tears of exhaustion and despair. Her mother's medical bills from her fatal asthma complication and Emma's own student loans had created a financial hole she could never seem to climb out of, despite working double shifts whenever possible. Now, as the snow accumulates on her shoulders, she wonders if anyone would even notice if she simply disappeared into the storm. The sound of expensive leather shoes crunching through snow breaks through her thoughts. Emma looks up to see a tall man in an elegant black cashmere coat walking toward her, holding the hand of a small girl bundled in a bright red winter coat and matching knitted hat. The man appears to be in his mid-30s with an air of confidence that speaks of success and authority, but there's something in his expression as he looks at Emma that suggests concern rather than judgment. The little girl beside him, no more than 7 years old, clutches a small teddy bear and watches Emma with curious, empathetic eyes. Her cheeks are flushed from the cold, and her breath forms tiny clouds that dissipate into the night air. "Excuse me," the man says gently, approaching Emma with obvious concern. "I'm Alexander Winters, and this is my daughter Sophie. We were waiting for our car service when I noticed you've been sitting here for quite some time. Are you all right?" Emma looks up at this well-dressed stranger and his daughter, feeling embarrassed by her obvious circumstances, but touched by their genuine concern. She tries to straighten her wrinkled uniform and wipe away any trace of tears. "I'm Emma," she replies, her voice barely steady due to both the cold and her emotional exhaustion. "I'm waiting for a train, but it seems to be delayed indefinitely because of the storm." Alexander studies Emma's face, taking in her exhaustion and the way she's shivering despite her attempts to appear composed. "You look frozen. How long have you been waiting out here?" "About 2 hours now," Emma admits, trying to keep her teeth from chattering. "But I'm fine, really. The train should be here soon." Sophie tugs on her father's coat and whispers something in his ear. Alexander nods and kneels down to his daughter's level for a brief, quiet conversation that Emma cannot hear. When Alexander stands up, his expression has changed to one of careful consideration. "Emma, I know this might sound unusual, but Sophie and I would like to make you an offer. Would you consider having a warm meal with us while we talk about something that might benefit all of us?" Emma hesitates, her natural caution warring with her desperate need for warmth and the genuine kindness she senses from both father and daughter. "That's very generous, Mr. Winters, but I don't want to impose on your evening." Sophie steps forward and looks up at Emma with the kind of direct honesty that only children possess. "Please come with us, Miss Emma. Daddy says you're cold and sad, and we don't like it when people are cold and sad." 20 minutes later, Emma finds herself in an elegant restaurant wrapped in Alexander's spare scarf and holding a cup of hot soup that is gradually bringing feeling back to her frozen hands. Sophie sits beside her, chattering about her favorite nurses at the hospital where she had been treated for asthma, while Alexander observes them with interest. "Emma," Alexander says carefully after they have ordered their main courses, "I hope you won't think I'm being intrusive, but you mentioned you're a nurse, and you seem to be facing some kind of difficult situation tonight." Emma feels tears spring to her eyes as the stress of her circumstances finally overwhelms her carefully maintained composure. "I lost my apartment today," she admits quietly, staring down at her soup. "I've been working extra shifts to try to catch up on my rent, But it wasn't enough. I don't have anywhere to go tonight. Alexander and Sophie exchange glances, and Emma can see some kind of silent communication passing between them. Emma, Alexander says gently, what I'm about to suggest might sound completely unconventional, but I hope you'll hear me out. Emma nods, curious despite her exhaustion. Sophie and I live in a large house that has far more space than two people need, Alexander continues. I'm a single father who travels frequently for business, and I've been struggling to find reliable, caring childcare for Sophie. She needs someone who understands children and can provide the kind of nurturing presence that I want her to have when I'm away. Sophie nods enthusiastically. Daddy works very hard, but sometimes he has to go to other cities, and I stay with babysitters who don't really know me. Alexander leans forward slightly. Emma, you need a home, and I need someone I can trust to care for my daughter. What if we could help each other? You could live in our guest suite, have your own space and privacy, but be available to care for Sophie when my work requires me to travel. In return, you would have a place to live and a salary that would allow you to continue your nursing career without the financial stress you're currently facing. Emma stares at them both, hardly believing what she's hearing. Mr. Winters, that's incredibly generous, but you don't know anything about me. How can you trust a stranger with your daughter? Alexander smiles, glancing at Sophie, who is nodding encouragingly. Emma, I've spent the last hour watching how you interact with Sophie, how you listen to her stories, how you respond to her questions. I can see that you have the kind of natural warmth and patience that comes from genuinely caring about children. Plus, your work as a pediatric nurse tells me you have the skills and background to provide excellent care. Sophie reaches over and takes Emma's hand. Miss Emma, I think you would be a wonderful person to have in our family. You have kind eyes, and you make me feel safe. Emma feels overwhelmed by the generosity and trust these virtual strangers are offering her. I don't know what to say. This seems too good to be true. Say you'll consider it, Alexander replies. Why don't you come home with us tonight, see the house and the room that would be yours, and take some time to think about whether this arrangement would work for all of us. As they step outside the restaurant, the snow has lightened to gentle flakes that drift lazily through the night air. Alexander's driver is waiting with a sleek black car that looks out of place among the snow-covered streets. Emma hesitates for just a moment before allowing Alexander to help her into the warmth of the vehicle. The drive takes them through progressively more affluent neighborhoods until they reach a gated community of elegant homes set back from the street. Alexander's house, more accurately described as a mansion, sits at the end of a curved driveway, its windows glowing with warm light against the darkness. Emma tries to hide her awe as they enter the house, but she can't help staring at the soaring ceilings, sweeping staircase, and tasteful artwork that adorns the walls. The house is beautiful but lacks the warmth of a real home. Everything is perfectly placed but feels untouched, like a museum rather than a living space. Mrs. Jenkins, our housekeeper, maintains the house during the day, Alexander explains as he gives Emma a tour, but she doesn't live in, and she's not particularly comfortable with childcare. As if summoned by her name, an older woman with steely gray hair and a perpetual frown appears in the hallway. Mr. Winters, you're back earlier than expected, she says, eyeing Emma with undisguised suspicion. Mrs. Jenkins, this is Emma Carter. She's a pediatric nurse and will be staying with us for a while as Sophie's caregiver, Alexander explains smoothly. Would you please prepare the blue guest suite for her? Mrs. Jenkins nods stiffly before disappearing up the stairs, her disapproval hanging in the air behind her. Don't mind Mrs. Jenkins, Sophie whispers to Emma. She's grumpy with everyone except Daddy. Alexander shows Emma to a spacious guest suite with its own bathroom and sitting area. The room is decorated in soothing shades of blue and cream, with large windows that would offer a view of the garden in daylight. This would be your space, Alexander explains. Complete privacy when you want it. The house has plenty of room for all of us without feeling crowded. Sophie tugs on Emma's hand, eager to show her the rest of the house. And this is my room, she announces proudly, leading Emma into a child's paradise of books, toys, and a canopy bed draped in pink tulle. And over here is my special medicine cabinet for my asthma. Emma looks at the organized array of inhalers, nebulizers, and medications. Clearly, Sophie's asthma is serious and well managed. You're very organized with your medications, Emma observes. Daddy makes sure I have everything I need, Sophie explains. But sometimes the babysitters get scared when I have trouble breathing. I wouldn't be scared, Emma says gently. I help children with asthma every day at the hospital. Sophie's face lights up. See, Daddy, I told you she was perfect. Later that night, after Sophie has been tucked into bed, Alexander invites Emma to join him in his study, a warm, wood-paneled room lined with books and featuring a comfortable seating area near a fireplace. I wanted to talk more about the practical aspects of this arrangement, Alexander says, pouring Emma a cup of tea. I'm the CEO of Winters Pharmaceuticals. It's a family company started by my grandfather. We develop and manufacture various medications, including treatments for respiratory conditions like Sophie's asthma. Emma's eyes widen slowly. Winters Pharmaceuticals? My mother used your company's asthma medication. I hope it helped her, Alexander says sincerely. Emma looks down. She had severe asthma all her life. She passed away 2 years ago from complications during a particularly bad attack. I'm very sorry to hear that, Alexander says, genuine sympathy in his voice. Sophie was diagnosed when she was 3. Her mother, he pauses, seeming to consider his words carefully. Catherine, my ex-wife, found it difficult to cope with Sophie's condition. The constant worry, the midnight hospital runs, the treatments. She left when Sophie was 4, saying she couldn't handle the stress of having a chronically ill child. Emma feels a surge of anger toward this unknown woman. That must have been incredibly difficult for both of you. Alexander nods. Sophie doesn't remember much about her mother, but she feels the absence keenly. I've tried to provide everything she needs, but my work often takes me away from home. That's where you would come in. He outlines the arrangement in more detail, the salary, which is more than generous, the expectations regarding Sophie's care, the flexibility that would allow Emma to continue her nursing career on a part-time basis if she wishes. The most important thing is that Sophie feels safe and cared for, Alexander emphasizes. She took to you immediately, which rarely happens. She's usually quite shy with strangers. Emma considers the offer, which seems almost too perfect. A beautiful place to live, a salary that would allow her to pay off her debts, and work caring for a child she already feels drawn to. But doubt creeps in. Why would this wealthy, successful man trust a stranger he met at a train station? Mr. Winters. Alexander, please. Alexander, Emma corrects herself. I have to ask, why me? You could hire anyone with my qualifications or better. Why offer this to someone you just met? Alexander is quiet for a moment, considering his answer. Do you believe in fate, Emma? Or perhaps just fortunate timing? When Sophie saw you at the train station, she whispered to me, Daddy, that lady looks like she needs help, just like I needed help when I couldn't breathe. She has an intuition about people that I've learned to trust. He sets down his tea. The truth is, we've gone through 6 nannies in the past year. Most were qualified on paper but lacked the genuine warmth Sophie needs. Some were uncomfortable with her medical needs. Others were just doing a job. Sophie needs more than that, and frankly, so do I. Emma nods, understanding the challenge. And you think I could provide that? I saw how you interacted with her over dinner. You listened, really listened to her stories. You answered her questions about the hospital with patience and honesty. And most importantly, you made her feel valued. Alexander leans forward, his expression earnest. Those aren't skills you can teach or qualities you can fake. And Emma feels the weight of his trust, a trust she hasn't earned but desperately wants to be worthy of. I would need to give notice at the hospital, she says slowly, making her decision, and retrieve my belongings if they're still there. Alexander smiles, relief evident in his expression. We can take care of all that tomorrow. For tonight, I think we could all use some rest. As Emma prepares for bed in the luxurious guest suite, she can't help but marvel at how drastically her circumstances have changed in just a few hours. From homeless and desperate to having a roof over her head and a promising new position. It seems almost like a dream, and part of her fear is waking up back on that cold train platform. But as she slips between the soft sheets, Emma allows herself to hope for the first time in months. Perhaps this strange twist of fate is exactly what she needed. Not just a job or a place to stay, but a chance to be part of something that feels remarkably like a family. Down the hall, Sophie sleeps peacefully, her breathing even and untroubled for now. And in his study, Alexander looks at a photograph of Sophie as a toddler, before her mother left, wondering if he's made the right decision in bringing a stranger into their home. But something about Emma's genuine concern for Sophie and her straightforward manner gives him confidence that this unconventional arrangement might be exactly what his daughter needs, and perhaps what he needs as well. The next morning, Emma wakes to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows in the momentary disorientation of not knowing where she is. Reality quickly returns as she takes in the elegant blue guest suite and remembers the events of the previous night. She checks her phone, retrieved from her purse and now fully charged, and sees that it's just past 7 in the morning. After a quick shower in the luxurious ensuite bathroom, Emma puts on her nurse's uniform from yesterday, grimacing at its wrinkled state. She makes her way downstairs, following the smell of coffee and the sound of cheerful chatter. In the kitchen, she finds Sophie sitting at a large island counter, swinging her legs as she carefully arranges berries on top of her pancakes to form a smiley face. Alexander stands at the stove, spatula in hand, looking surprisingly domestic in casual weekend clothes rather than the formal business attire from last night. "Good morning," Emma says, feeling suddenly awkward and out of place in the bright morning light. The fantasy of last night now seems presumptuous in the harsh reality of day. "Miss Emma," Sophie exclaims, her face lighting up. "Daddy made pancakes. Do you want some with blueberry eyes or strawberry eyes?" "Blueberry sounds perfect," Emma replies, smiling despite her uncertainty. Alexander turns from the stove, a warm smile softening his features. "Good morning, Emma. I hope you slept well. Coffee?" As Emma takes a seat at the counter, accepting the steaming mug of coffee Alexander offers, she can't help but feel like an intruder in this domestic scene. "About last night," she begins hesitantly. "After breakfast," Alexander says quietly, understanding in his eyes. "Let's just enjoy this moment first." Sophie chatters happily throughout breakfast, telling Emma about her school, her favorite subjects, art and science, and her best friend Zoe, who also has asthma. "That's how we became friends," she explained seriously. "We both had to sit out during gym class, and we made up our own games instead." After breakfast, when Mrs. Jenkins arrives and takes Sophie to help feed the fish in the living room aquarium, Alexander invites Emma to join him in the garden. Despite the snow, the garden has a covered patio with heating elements that make it comfortable to sit and talk. "I want to be completely transparent with you," Alexander begins, his tone becoming more businesslike. "If you decide to accept my offer, there would be a formal employment contract, background checks, all standard procedures. I'm not asking you to make a decision right now, but I wanted to address any concerns you might have." Emma appreciates his directness. "I understand, and I would expect nothing less. I have nothing to hide, but—" She hesitates, then decides honesty is best. "My credit score is terrible because of my mother's medical bills and my student loans. That's why I fell behind on rent." Alexander waves away her concern. "Financial difficulties don't reflect on your character, Emma. What matters to me is how you care for Sophie." As if on cue, Sophie appears at the patio door, her face flushed with excitement. "Daddy, Miss Emma, come quick. I found something amazing." They follow Sophie to the large aquarium in the living room, where she points to a cluster of tiny, almost transparent fish swimming near a plant. "Baby fish," she exclaims. "Mrs. Jenkins says they were just born." Emma kneels beside Sophie, sharing in her wonder at the tiny new lives. "They're called fry," she explains. "Baby fish are called fry." "Like French fries?" Sophie giggles, delighted by this information. "Sort of," Emma laughs, "but these little ones won't taste good with ketchup." Sophie's peals of laughter fill the room, and Alexander watches the interaction with a thoughtful expression. The ease between Emma and Sophie is undeniable, a natural connection that can't be manufactured or forced. Later that morning, Alexander arranges for his driver to take Emma to her former apartment to retrieve her belongings. To her relief, most of her boxes remain on the sidewalk, though damp from the snow. The landlord appears, ready to argue, but backs down quickly when Alexander's driver mentions Mr. Winter's name and makes a call. Within an hour, Emma's meager possessions are loaded into the car. As they return to the Winters' home, Emma feels a strange mix of emotions: gratitude, hope, but also trepidation. Everything is happening so quickly, and part of her fears this opportunity is too good to be true. Back at the house, Alexander helps Emma settle into the blue suite, arranging for her clothing to be dry cleaned and her books to be placed on the empty shelves. Take the weekend to get acclimated, he suggests. I don't have any business trips planned for the next 2 weeks, so you'll have time to learn Sophie's routine without pressure. That afternoon, while Sophie naps, a daily necessity due to her asthma, Alexander gives Emma a more detailed tour of the house and grounds. The property is even more impressive in daylight. 3 acres of landscape gardens surrounding the 8,000 square foot house, complete with a pool, currently covered for winter, a small greenhouse, and a play area designed specifically for Sophie. This house has been in my family for 2 generations, Alexander explains as they walk through the garden. My father expanded it when he took over the company, but after he passed away 5 years ago, it became just Sophie and me, and it's far too big for 2 people. It's beautiful, Emma says sincerely, but it doesn't quite feel like a home, Alexander finishes for her. I know. Mrs. Jenkins keeps it perfectly maintained, but it lacks something essential. Sophie noticed it too. Last Christmas, she asked why our house doesn't feel warm and cozy like her friend Zoe's much smaller home. As they re-enter the house, Emma notices a door she hadn't seen before. What's down there? She asks. My home office, Alexander replies, opening the door to reveal a staircase leading to a lower level. Would you like to see? The basement has been converted into a state-of-the-art home office with multiple computer screens, conference capabilities, and walls lined with scientific journals and medical texts. This is where I work when I need to be home with Sophie, but still connected to the company, Alexander explains. Emma's attention is caught by a large whiteboard covered in chemical formulas and medical terminology. Is this a new drug you're developing? Alexander nods, a hint of excitement entering his voice. It's a next-generation asthma medication, one that could prevent attacks rather than just treat them. It's been my personal project for the past 3 years. Because of Sophie, Emma says, understanding immediately. Yes, Alexander confirms. After her diagnosis, I redirected a significant portion of our R&D budget to respiratory research. The current treatments are effective but have limitations and side effects. This new approach could change lives. Emma studies the whiteboard with genuine interest. Her nursing background gives her enough knowledge to grasp the basics of what Alexander is trying to achieve. This is impressive work, she says sincerely. My mother would have benefited tremendously from something like this. A shadow crosses Alexander's face. The development process is frustratingly slow, and lately we've faced pressure from investors to cut costs and rush the testing phase. I've been pushing back, but it's been challenging. Before Emma can respond, they hear Sophie calling from upstairs. Daddy, Miss Emma, where are you? Down here, sweetheart, Alexander calls back. We're coming up now. As they climb the stairs, he adds quietly to Emma, let's not mention the medication to Sophie. She knows I'm working on something to help people with asthma, but I don't want to give her false hope until we're further along. Emma nods her understanding as they emerge to find Sophie waiting for them, her favorite teddy bear clutched in one arm and an inhaler in her other hand. I woke up and couldn't find you, she says, a hint of anxiety in her voice. I'm sorry, sweetheart, Alexander says, kneeling to her level. We should have left you a note. Did you need your inhaler? Are you feeling okay? Sophie nods, taking a puff from her inhaler as a precaution. I'm okay, I just got scared when I couldn't find anyone. Emma kneels beside Alexander, bringing herself to Sophie's eye level. That must have been frightening, she says gently. In the future, I promise we'll always let you know where we are. Sophie's expression brightens. Does that mean you're staying, Miss Emma? Emma glances at Alexander, who gives her an encouraging smile but remains silent, clearly leaving the decision to her. Yes, Sophie, Emma says, making her decision in that moment. I'd like to stay and take care of you if that's okay with you. Sophie throws her arms around Emma's neck in a spontaneous hug. It's more than okay. It's perfect. Over Sophie's shoulder, Emma's eyes meet Alexander's, and the gratitude and relief she sees there confirm that she's made the right choice. For the first time in years, Emma feels like she's exactly where she's supposed to be. Not just needed, but wanted. That evening, as Alexander prepares to put Sophie to bed, the little girl insists that Emma join them for story time. Miss Emma does the best voices, Sophie declares, though Emma has yet to read her a single story. I just know she does. Alexander hands Emma the book, a well-worn copy of The Secret Garden, with an amused smile. No pressure, he whispers. To everyone's delight, Emma does indeed do the best voices, bringing the characters to life with different accents and inflections. Sophie listens with rapt attention, her eyes growing heavy as the story progresses. By the final page of the chapter, she's fast asleep, her breathing deep and even. Alexander and Emma tiptoe from the room, carefully leaving the door ajar. You're a natural, Thalien. Claro, Alexander says as they descend the stairs. Sophie usually asks for at least 3 stories before she'll consider sleeping. I used to read to the children at the hospital, Emma explains. Sometimes it's the only comfort we can offer them during difficult procedures or long nights. They pause at the landing, the house quiet around them. Thank you, Alexander says simply, for giving this arrangement a chance. I know it's unconventional, but I believe it could work well for all of us. Emma nods, suddenly aware of how close they're standing. I should thank you, she replies softly. You've offered me a lifeline when I needed it most. For a moment, something unspoken passes between them, a recognition of mutual need and unexpected connection. Then Alexander steps back slightly, maintaining professional boundaries. Well, good night, Emma. I'll see you in the morning. As Emma returns to her room, she feels a strange mixture of emotions, gratitude, hope, but also a flicker of something else she's not ready to examine too closely. For now, she's content knowing she has a roof over her head, a job caring for a child she already adores, and perhaps, just perhaps, the beginnings of something that feels remarkably like belonging. In the master bedroom, Alexander stands at the window, looking out at the snow-covered garden. He thinks about the unexpected turn his life has taken in just 24 hours and wonders if he's being impulsive, bringing a stranger into their home. But something about Emma feels right, the way Sophie responded to her, the genuine warmth in her interactions, her straightforward manner and quiet strength. For the first time since Catherine left, taking with her the warmth and life of their home, Alexander allows himself to hope that perhaps they might become something more than just a father and daughter, rattling around in a too-large house. Perhaps, with Emma, they might become a family. The weeks pass in a comfortable rhythm as Emma settles into her new role in the Winters household. Each morning begins with breakfast together. Alexander making pancakes on weekends, Emma preparing healthy breakfast during the week. Sophie blossoms under Emma's care, her natural exuberance no longer tempered by the revolving door of temporary caregivers who never quite understood her needs. 1 month after Emma's arrival, on a crisp Saturday morning in February, the peaceful routine is interrupted by an unexpected development. Sophie wakes up wheezing slightly, her breathing labored but not yet critical. It might be the change in weather, Alexander explains as Emma helps Sophie with her nebulizer treatment in the sunny kitchen. Her symptoms often flare up when seasons begin to shift. Emma nods, her experienced hands checking Sophie's pulse as the little girl breathes in the medicated mist. Her color is good, and her heart rate is stable. We'll keep a close eye on her today. I'm supposed to have dinner with the board tonight, Alexander says, his brow furrowed with concern. But I can cancel. No need, Emma interrupts gently. Sophie and I will be fine. This is precisely why I'm here, remember? You go to your dinner, and we'll have a girls' night in. Alexander hesitates, clearly torn between his responsibilities as a CEO and his concern as a father. You're sure? Sophie pulls the nebulizer mask away momentarily. I want Emma to take care of me, Daddy. She knows all the best stories for sick days. The confidence in Sophie's voice seems to reassure Alexander. All right then, but you'll call me immediately if anything changes? Of course, Emma promises. Now go prepare for your meeting. I've got this. After Alexander leaves for his office to review documents before his dinner, Emma helps Sophie settle on the living room sofa with blankets, her favorite stuffed animals, and a selection of books and quiet activities. When I was little and had asthma attacks, Emma confides, tucking a blanket around Sophie, my mom would make me special tea with honey and lemon. Would you like to try some? Sophie nods eagerly, and Emma heads to the kitchen to prepare the soothing drink. Mrs. Jenkins watches from the doorway with her usual suspicion. Mr. Winters prefers Sophie to stick to the prescribed medical regimen, the housekeeper says stiffly. Emma measures honey into a mug with practiced movements. This isn't replacing any of her medication, Mrs. Jenkins. It's just something extra to soothe her throat and keep her hydrated, which is important during an asthma flare-up. Mrs. Jenkins sniffs disapprovingly, but retreats without further comment. Emma returns to Sophie with the warm tea and settles beside her on the sofa. Tell me about your mommy, Sophie says suddenly, catching Emma off guard. Was she nice like you? Emma smiles softly, memories washing over her. Yes, she was wonderful. She worked very hard as a teacher, and even though she was sick, a lot like you sometimes are, she never let it stop her from doing the things she loved. Is she in heaven now? Sophie asked with the directness only children possess. Yes, Emma says simply. She is. My mommy isn't in heaven, Sophie says matter-of-factly. Daddy says she lives far away in a place called Paris. She makes fancy clothes for important people. Emma keeps her expression neutral, despite her internal surprise. Alexander had mentioned that Sophie's mother had left when she was 4, but not that she was still in contact or had such a high-profile career. Do you remember her? Emma asks gently. Sophie shakes her head. Not really. Sometimes I think I do, but Daddy says it's probably just from pictures. She sends me presents on my birthday and Christmas, but she never visits. The little girl's voice contains no self-pity, just simple acceptance of her reality. Throughout the month, Sophie's breathing gradually improves with regular treatments and unrest. By early evening, she's feeling well enough to help Emma prepare a simple dinner of soup and grilled cheese sandwiches. Comfort food perfect for a day when Sophie isn't at her best. As they eat at the kitchen island, Sophie chatters happily about school and her friends, seemingly recovered from her morning respiratory distress. Emma keeps a watchful eye on her breathing patterns, but relaxes as the little girl's energy returns to normal. After dinner, they settle in for a movie in the home theater, a room Emma hadn't even realized existed until Sophie led her to it, hidden behind what appeared to be an ordinary bookcase in the library. The theater has plush reclining seats, a massive screen, and even a small popcorn machine. Daddy and I have movie night here sometimes, Sophie explains as Emma marvels at the setup, but he always falls asleep before the ending. They choose The Secret Garden, a film adaptation of the book they've been reading together. As the story unfolds on screen, Emma notices Sophie watching her reactions as much as the movie itself. What is it, sweetheart? Emma asks during a quiet moment into the film. Sophie hesitates, then asks, Do you like living here with us, Miss Emma? The question catches Emma by surprise. Of course I do. Why do you ask? Because I really want you to stay forever, Sophie says with childlike honesty. You make everything better. Daddy smiles more now, and the house feels different, warmer like my friend Zoe's house. Emma feels a tightness in her chest that has nothing to do with asthma. I like being here very much, Sophie. Promise you won't leave like my mommy did? Sophie's voice is small, vulnerable. Emma chooses her words carefully. I promise I will always be honest with you, Sophie. Right now, I'm very happy here and have no plans to leave. But grown-up lives can be complicated sometimes. What I can promise is that no matter what happens, I'll always care about you and make sure you know that. Sophie seems to consider this thoughtfully before nodding. That's a good promise. Daddy says promises you can keep are better than big promises you might break. They return their attention to the movie, but Emma's mind is now occupied with the weight of Sophie's trust and the complicated feelings beginning to develop toward both the little girl and her father. Later that night, after Sophie has been tucked in and has fallen asleep, Emma curls up in the window seat of the blue guest suite with a cup of tea, watching the moonlight reflect off the snow-covered garden. Her phone buzzes with a text from Alexander. How is Sophie? The message reads. Emma types back quickly. Much better. Breathing normal, no fever. Fast asleep now. How was your dinner? 3 dots appear as Alexander types his response. Endless. Board members more concerned with quarterly profits than patient outcomes. Heading home now. Thank you for taking such good care of her. Emma smiles at the screen, typing, That's what I'm here for. There's a pause before Alexander's next message appears. It's more than that, and you know it. You've brought something essential back to our home. Sophie adores you. Emma stares at the message, unsure how to respond to the unexpected warmth. Before she can decide, another text appears. I'll be home in 20 minutes. Still awake enough for a debriefing? Of course, Emma replies. I'll meet you in the study. She changes from her pajamas into jeans and a sweater, feeling strangely nervous about meeting Alexander alone. Their interactions have been friendly, but primarily focused on Sophie and household logistics. Tonight's texts hint at something more personal. When Alexander arrives home, Emma is waiting in the study with 2 glasses of the red wine he keeps on a small bar cart. He looks tired but smiles genuinely when he sees her. You're a lifesaver, he says, accepting the wine and loosening his tie. How was she really? Honestly, she handled it well, Emma reports. Her breathing improved steadily throughout the day, and by dinner she was almost back to normal. I monitored her oxygen levels with the pulse oximeter, and they stayed within safe parameters. Alexander nods gratefully. You have no idea what a relief it is to have someone here who understands her condition and doesn't panic at the first wheeze. She's a remarkable child, Emma says sincerely. Very aware of her body and honest about her symptoms, which makes my job much easier. Alexander settles into an armchair across from Emma, taking a sip of his wine. She mentioned something interesting on the phone when I called her earlier. Something about your mother having asthma too? Emma nods, a shadow crossing her face. Yes, severe asthma her whole life. She managed it well most of the time, but 2 years ago she had a particularly bad attack at home. By the time the ambulance arrived, she trails off, the memory still painful. I'm so sorry, Alexander says softly. That must have been devastating. It was, Emma acknowledges, especially because I was working a double shift at the hospital when it happened. I've always wondered if I could have helped if I'd been there. Is that why you became a nurse? Because of your mother's condition? Emma considers the question. Partly, I always knew I wanted to help people, and growing up with a chronically ill parent gives you a certain perspective. But I specifically chose pediatrics because children have such resilience. Even in terrible circumstances, they find moments of joy and hope that adults often miss. Alexander smiles, his eyes warming. Like Sophie insisting on making you a get-well card when she was the one having an asthma attack. Emma laughs. Exactly like that. She was concerned that I looked tired from taking care of her. A comfortable silence falls between them as they sip their wine, the crackling fire in the study's fireplace casting a warm glow over the room. The board is pushing me to accelerate the testing phase for the new asthma medication, Alexander says suddenly, his expression darkening. They want to cut corners to get it to market faster. Emma frowns. That sounds dangerous. It is, he agrees grimly. The preliminary results are promising, but we need more comprehensive testing to understand potential side effects, especially in children. But the investors are getting impatient. They see the potential profit margin and want to capitalize on it as quickly as possible. What will you do? Emma asks. Alexander runs a hand through his hair, a gesture Emma has come to recognize as a sign of his frustration. Fight them, of course. This isn't just any medication to me. It's something that could help Sophie and millions of children like her. I won't compromise on safety. That must be difficult standing up to your board, Emma observes. My father built this company on the principle that patient welfare comes before profit, Alexander says firmly. I won't betray that legacy, especially not with something that could affect Sophie's health. Emma studies him thoughtfully. You're nothing like what I expected when I first met you at the train station. Alexander raises an eyebrow, a hint of amusement crossing his tired features. Oh, and what did you expect? I don't know, Emma admits with a small smile. Someone more corporate, I suppose. Less invested in the actual impact of your work. Disappointed? He teases. Quite the opposite, Emma replies honestly. It's refreshing to meet someone in your position who hasn't lost sight of what really matters. Their eyes meet across the space between them, and for a moment Emma feels a connection that goes beyond their professional arrangement. Alexander seems to feel it too, his expression softening as he holds her gaze. The moment is broken by the chiming of Alexander's phone. He glances down at it with a frown. Eleanor, my mother, she's the chairwoman of the board and apparently needs to discuss tomorrow's emergency meeting immediately. He looks up apologetically. I should take this. Emma nods, standing to leave. Of course, I'll check on Sophie once more before I turn in. As she reaches the door, Alexander calls after her softly. Emma? She turns back. Yes? Thank you, not just for today, but for everything you've brought to this house in the short time you have been here. Sophie isn't the only one who's grateful you came into our lives. Emma feels warmth spread through her chest. Good night, Alexander. Good night, Emma. As Emma checks on Sophie, finding the little girl sleeping peacefully with her breathing calm and regular, she reflects on how quickly this mansion has begun to feel like home. The guarded CEO she met at the train station has revealed himself to be a devoted father and principled businessman, fighting for what he believes is right, even when it would be easier to give in. And Sophie, sweet, brave Sophie with her insightful questions and generous heart, has worked her way into Emma's affections with remarkable speed. As Emma brushes a strand of hair from the sleeping child's forehead, she acknowledges the growing attachment she feels toward this makeshift family. It's dangerous territory, she knows. She was hired as Sophie's caregiver, not as a replacement for the mother who left. And yet, as she returns to her room and prepares for bed, Emma can't help wondering if fate brought her to that train platform for a reason greater than either she or Alexander initially realized. The next morning, Emma wakes to the sound of raised voices coming from Alexander's study. She quickly dresses and heads downstairs, concerned that the argument might wake Sophie. In the hallway outside the study, Mrs. Jenkins stands with a disapproving expression, a breakfast tray in her hands. "Mr. Winters is in a meeting," she says stiffly. "He asked not to be disturbed." "Is Sophie still sleeping?" Emma asks. "Yes, but..." Before Mrs. Jenkins can finish, the study door flies open, and a regal-looking older woman storms out. She has Alexander's striking blue eyes and carries herself with unmistakable authority despite her diminutive stature. She stops short at the sight of Emma. "You must be the train station nurse," she says, her tone making the words sound vaguely insulting. "I'm Eleanor Winters, Alexander's mother and chairwoman of Winters Pharmaceuticals." Emma straightens her shoulders, extending her hand professionally. "Emma Carter, it's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Winters." Eleanor ignores the offered hand, her gaze sweeping over Emma with obvious assessment. "How convenient that my son happened to find a pediatric nurse just when he needed childcare. One might almost think it was planned." Before Emma can respond to the insinuation, Alexander appears in the doorway, his expression tight with barely contained anger. "Mother, that's enough. Emma is a valued member of this household, and you will treat her with respect." Eleanor turns to her son with a dismissive wave. "We're not finished discussing this, Alexander. The board meeting is at noon, and I expect you to have reconsidered your position by then." With a final cold glance at Emma, she sweeps past them and out the front door. Alexander runs a hand over his face, looking exhausted. "I apologize for my mother's behavior. She's difficult at the best of times." "No apology necessary," Emma says, though she feels shaken by the encounter. "Is everything all right?" Alexander gestures for her to follow him back into the study, closing the door behind them. "The board is convening an emergency meeting about the new asthma medication. My mother is leading the faction, pushing for accelerated testing and faster market release." Emma frowns. "Even though you're the CEO?" "Even though," Alexander confirms grimly. "I have controlling interest in the company, but the board has significant influence, particularly regarding research protocols. My mother believes I'm being overly cautious because of Sophie." "And are you?" Emma asks carefully. Alexander considers the question with surprising candor. "Perhaps I am more cautious because I understand the stakes personally. But isn't that exactly the perspective that's needed? Someone who sees patients as people, not just profit centers?" "I think so," Emma agrees. "Your personal connection to this issue makes you more committed to getting it right, not less qualified to make decisions." Alexander studies her for a moment, seeming to draw strength from her confidence in him. "The meeting's at noon. I should prepare my counter-arguments. Would you like me to bring you some breakfast first?" Mrs. Jenkins had a tray ready. "Thank you, but I'm not hungry," Alexander replies, already turning to his desk where papers are spread out in organized chaos. "Could you check on Sophie? She should continue her preventative treatments today, even though she's feeling better." "Of course," Emma says, recognizing his shift back to business mode. "I'll keep her occupied so you can work." As Emma turns to leave, Alexander calls after her. "Emma?" She pauses at the door. "Yes?" "Would you be willing to come to the company with me tomorrow? I'd like you to meet the research team and perhaps offer some insights from your clinical experience with asthma patients. Emma blinks in surprise. Me? But I'm just a nurse, not a researcher. You're a healthcare professional with valuable frontline experience, Alexander corrects her. And sometimes that perspective is exactly what laboratory scientists need to hear. Emma feels a flush of pride at his confidence in her professional opinion. I'd be honored. But what about Sophie? Mrs. Jenkins can watch her for a few hours, Alexander says. Sophie's feeling better, and it would be good for her to see that you and I can work together professionally as well. Emma nods, a small smile forming. All right then, tomorrow it is. As she heads upstairs to check on Sophie, Emma reflects on this new development. Alexander values her not just as Sophie's caregiver, but as a healthcare professional with knowledge worth sharing. It's a level of respect she hadn't expected, especially from someone in his position. She finds Sophie awake and in good spirits, eager to show Emma the science project she's working on for school, a model of the respiratory system made from recyclable materials. Together, they spend the morning working on the project, with Emma explaining in child-friendly terms how lungs work and why Sophie sometimes has trouble breathing. So my asthma means the tubes that carry air get too tight? Sophie asks, carefully gluing a blue straw to represent a bronchial tube. That's exactly right, Emma confirms. And the medicine you take helps those tubes relax and open up so air can flow more easily. Sophie considers this information thoughtfully. Is that what Daddy is making in his laboratory? Medicine to help the tubes stay open? Emma hesitates, remembering Alexander's request not to discuss the new medication with Sophie. Your daddy is working on many important medicines to help people breathe better, she says carefully. He's very dedicated to helping people like you. Sophie nods sagely. That's why he argues with Grandma Eleanor. She wants the medicine to make lots of money, but Daddy wants it to make people better. Out of the mouths of babes, Emma thinks, impressed by Sophie's perceptiveness. Your daddy is a good man who cares about doing the right thing. That's why you like him, isn't it? Sophie asks innocently, her focus on attaching cotton balls to represent air sacs in the lungs. Emma feels heat rise to her cheeks. I respect your father very much, she says, trying to maintain professional boundaries despite Sophie's uncanny ability to see through them. Daddy likes you too, Sophie continues matter-of-factly. He smiles more now, and his eyes get all crinkly when he looks at you, like they used to in the pictures with Mommy. Emma busies herself with the project, unsure how to respond to Sophie's observations. The little girl, thankfully, moves on to questions about how oxygen travels in the bloodstream, allowing Emma to steer the conversation back to safer territory. Around noon, Alexander emerges from his study dressed in a formal suit for his board meeting. He stops by Sophie's room to say goodbye, his face lighting up at the sight of their project. Look at this masterpiece, he exclaims, examining the model with genuine interest. You've done an excellent job explaining the respiratory system, Sophie. Emma helped me, Sophie says proudly. She knows everything about lungs and breathing. Alexander's eyes meet Emma's over Sophie's head, warm with appreciation. Yes, she does. That's one of the many reasons we're lucky to have her. The moment is interrupted by the sound of Alexander's phone ringing. He checks it with a grimace. The car is waiting. I have to go face the firing squad. Good luck, Emma says sincerely. Stand your ground. Alexander nods gratefully before kneeling to kiss Sophie's forehead. Be good for Emma, sweetheart. I'll be back for dinner. After he leaves, Emma and Sophie complete the science project and spend the afternoon baking cookies, an activity that delights Sophie and fills the usually pristine kitchen with a homey warmth. Mrs. Jenkins hovers nearby, clearly disapproving of the mess, but unwilling to interfere directly with Emma's activities with Sophie. As they're cleaning up, the doorbell rings. Mrs. Jenkins goes to answer it and returns moments later, her expression even more pinched than usual. There's a Ms. Victoria Sloan here to see Mr. Winters, she announces. I informed her that he's at a meeting, but she insists on waiting for him. Before Emma can respond, a striking woman in her early 30s appears behind Mrs. Jenkins. She's elegantly dressed in a designer suit that emphasizes her slender figure, with perfectly styled blonde hair and flawless makeup. You must be the new nanny, she says to Emma, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. I'm Victoria Sloan. My father is Richard Sloan, Alexander's business partner and chief investor. Emma wipes her hands on a kitchen towel, conscious of the flour smudged on her cheek. Emma Carter, I'm Sophie's caregiver. Victoria's gaze shifts to Sophie, who is watching the exchange with undisguised curiosity. Hello, Sophie. You've grown since I last saw you. Are you feeling better? Your grandmother mentioned you were ill yesterday. I'm much better now, Sophie replies politely but without warmth. Emma took care of me. Victoria turns back to Emma, her assessment barely concealed. How fortunate that Alexander found someone with medical training. Sophie's health has always been such a concern for all of us who care about her. The emphasis on all of us who care about her feels deliberately exclusionary, as if to establish that Victoria belongs to Sophie's inner circle, while Emma remains an outsider. Emma maintains her professional demeanor despite the implied challenge. Sophie is a wonderful child. Taking care of her is a privilege. Victoria smiles thinly. Well, I won't interrupt your baking. I'll wait for Alexander in the living room. We have important business matters to discuss when he returns. After Victoria leaves the kitchen, Sophie whispers loudly, I don't like her. She always wears too much perfume and talks to me like I'm a baby. Emma gently shushes Sophie, though she privately agrees with the assessment. It's not polite to say things like that about guests, sweetheart. Now let's finish cleaning up, and then you can show me your favorite board game. They spend the next hour playing Candyland at the dining room table, carefully avoiding the living room where Victoria has made herself at home. Emma can't help wondering about the woman's relationship with Alexander. Is she just a business associate or something more? The proprietary way she moved through the house suggested familiarity beyond professional connections. When Alexander finally returns home around 5 o'clock, his expression is grim but determined. Emma and Sophie hear his arrival, and Victoria's immediate interception in the foyer. Alexander, darling, I've been waiting for hours. Your mother said the meeting was absolute chaos. You really must reconsider your position on the testing protocols. Alexander's reply is too low to hear, but his tone is firm. Sophie looks up at Emma with concern. Daddy sounds angry, she whispers. He's had a long day, Emma replies soothingly. Why don't we put the game away, and you can show him your finished science project? That will cheer him up. Sophie nods eagerly and rushes to retrieve her model from the craft room. While she's gone, Emma begins putting away the game pieces, trying not to eavesdrop on the increasingly heated conversation in the foyer. Despite her efforts, Victoria's voice carries clearly. Your mother thinks you're being influenced by your household help. This sudden concern with extended testing protocols coincidentally began when you hired a pediatric nurse, didn't it? Emma freezes, the game box halfway closed. Alexander's response is immediate and sharp. That's enough, Victoria. My decision is based on sound medical ethics and our company's founding principles, not anyone's influence. And I'd appreciate it if you'd refer to Emma by her name, not as household help. Victoria's tone softens, becoming almost placating. Alex, you know I only want what's best for you and the company. We've known each other since childhood. I understand the pressure you're under, especially with Sophie's condition. But you can't let personal concerns cloud your business judgment. I think it's time for you to leave, Alexander says firmly. We can discuss this at the office tomorrow. Your mother won't be pleased, Victoria warns. She and Daddy are counting on your cooperation. Good night, Victoria. A moment later, the front door closes with a decisive click, and Alexander appears in the dining room doorway. His tie is loosened, and he looks exhausted but resolute. Sorry about that, he says to Emma. Victoria can be persistent. No need to apologize, Emma replies, closing the game box. Sophie's getting her science project to show you. She's very proud of it. Alexander's expression softens immediately. I could use some good news. How was your day? Productive, Emma says with a smile. Sophie's breathing has been completely normal. We finished her project, and we made chocolate chip cookies. Sounds like paradise compared to my board meeting, Alexander says wryly. That bad? He sighs, running a hand through his hair. Worse, the board is split, with my mother and Richard Sloan leading the faction pushing for accelerated testing. They're threatening to bring in outside consultants to evaluate my leadership if I don't agree. Emma frowns. Can they do that? They can try, Alexander says grimly. I still hold controlling interest in the company, but a public battle would be messy and potentially damaging to our stock price, which is exactly what they were counting on to pressure me. Before Emma can respond, Sophie returns with her respiratory system model, her face alight with excitement. Daddy, look what Emma helped me make. Alexander's entire demeanor transforms as he kneels to examine Sophie's project, his corporate concerns temporarily set aside in favor of fatherly pride. This is incredible, sweetheart. You've labeled all the parts perfectly. As Sophie enthusiastically explains each component of her model, Emma watches the interaction with a warm feeling in her chest. Despite the pressures of his position and the conflict with his board, Alexander is fully present with his daughter, genuinely engaged in her achievement. It's in this moment that Emma realizes she's in dangerous territory emotionally. The professional boundaries she's tried to maintain and are blurring as she finds herself increasingly drawn to this family, not just as an employee, but as someone who cares deeply about both Sophie and Alexander. Later that evening, after Sophie has been tucked into bed, Emma finds Alexander in the kitchen, staring absently into a cup of coffee that has likely gone cold. She hesitates in the doorway, unsure whether to disturb his thoughts. He looks up, seeming unsurprised by her presence. Sophie asleep? Emma nods, entering the kitchen. Out like a light, the excitement of finishing her project and all that cookie baking wore her out. Alexander gestures to the seat across from him. Join me? I could use a friendly face after today's battles. Emma sits, noting the tension in his shoulders and the fatigue around his eyes. Would you like to talk about it? Not particularly, he admits with a rueful smile. But I probably should, especially since I've asked you to come to the lab tomorrow. He pushes his cold coffee aside. The board meeting was essentially a showdown over the testing protocols for our new asthma medication. My mother and Richard Sloan want to fast-track the approval process to capitalize on market demand. And you don't agree, Emma prompts. The preliminary results are promising, Alexander explains, but we've seen some concerning side effects in a small percentage of test subjects. Nothing life-threatening, but significant enough that I believe we need more comprehensive testing, especially before considering pediatric applications, which would delay the release and affect short-term profits, Emma concludes. Exactly. Wall Street doesn't reward caution, and our investors are impatient. Alexander sighs. My father would never have compromised on safety, and I won't either. Not when children like Sophie could be affected. Emma studies him thoughtfully. It can't be easy standing up to your mother and the board. Alexander's laugh is without humor. Eleanor Winters is a formidable opponent in the boardroom. She built this company alongside my father, but since his death, she's become increasingly focused on growth and market share rather than the ethical foundations he established. And Victoria? Emma asks, trying to keep her tone neutral. Where does she fit into all this? Alexander gives her a knowing look. Victoria Sloan is the daughter of our chief investor and my mother's goddaughter. We grew up together and both our families have always assumed we would eventually marry and unite the two sides of the business. I see, Emma says, ignoring the unexpected twinge of disappointment. An arranged marriage of corporate convenience. Something like that, Alexander agrees, though I've never encouraged those expectations. Victoria is brilliant and ambitious, but we want very different things. She and my mother share a vision for the company that I don't subscribe to. Emma hesitates, then asks the question that's been bothering her since her encounter with Victoria. Does she spend much time here? She seemed quite at home. She visits occasionally, usually when my mother sends her to persuade me on some business matter, Alexander explains. My mother believes Victoria can influence me where others can't. His expression softens into a genuine smile. She hasn't yet realized that Sophie is a much better judge of character than I am, and Sophie made her opinion of Victoria quite clear years ago. Emma can't help smiling at this. Sophie does have strong opinions. Indeed she does, including her opinion of you, which has been overwhelmingly positive from the start. Alexander's gaze is warm as it meets Emma's. She told me yesterday that you make our house feel like a home. Emma feels a heat rise to her cheeks. She's a special child. It's easy to care about her. And is it just Sophie you care about? Alexander asked quietly, his question hanging in the space between them. The moment is charged with unspoken possibilities. Emma opens her mouth to respond, but before she can form words, Alexander's phone rings loudly. breaking the tension. He checks the screen with a frown. It's the lab. I should take this. As Alexander steps away to take the call, Emma remains at the kitchen island, her heart beating faster than normal. What was she about to say? And more importantly, what would Alexander's response have been? The question lingers unanswered as Alexander returns, his expression now focused and professional. There's been a development with the test results. I need to go into the lab tonight. He glances at his watch. It's late. I'm sorry to cut our conversation short. Of course, Emma says, standing up. Sophie will be fine. Go do what you need to do. Alexander hesitates at the doorway. About tomorrow, I'd still like you to come to the lab if you're willing. Your perspective could be valuable, especially now. I'll be there, Emma promises. Alexander nods gratefully. Thank you, Emma, for everything. With that, he's gone, leaving Emma alone in the kitchen with her thoughts. As she prepares for bed that night, Emma reflects on the rapidly evolving dynamics in the Winters household. What began as a straightforward employment arrangement has become increasingly complex, with corporate politics, family expectations, and growing personal attachments complicating the situation. Tomorrow's visit to the laboratory will take her even deeper into Alexander's world, beyond the domestic sphere where her role is clearly defined. It's a professional opportunity she hadn't anticipated but welcomes, a chance to contribute meaningfully to work that could help patients like Sophie and her own mother. Yet as Emma drifts off to sleep, it's not the professional opportunity that occupies her thoughts, but Alexander's unanswered question. And is it just Sophie you care about? The truth, which she barely admits even to herself, is that she's beginning to care deeply for both Sophie and her father, a realization as thrilling as it is terrifying. The next morning dawns with a crystalline winter clarity, sunlight sparkling off fresh snow from an overnight dusting. Emma wakes early, nervous about her impending visit to Winters Pharmaceuticals. She dresses with extra care, selecting a professional outfit that strikes a balance between her role as Sophie's caregiver and the healthcare professional Alexander has asked to consult. Sophie is disappointed to learn that Emma won't be with her all day, but perks up when Emma promises to help with her homework that evening. Mrs. Jenkins, though clearly displeased with the arrangement, agrees to watch Sophie with her usual air of grudging duty. Alexander appears in the kitchen as Emma is finishing breakfast, looking tired but energized. Ready for your tour of the dark side of pharmaceutical research? He asks with a wry smile. Is it really that ominous? Emma replies, gathering her purse and coat. Only if you're allergic to bureaucracy and clipboards, Alexander says, holding the door for her. Though today might be more exciting than usual, given yesterday's developments. In the car, Alexander explains that the laboratory has found unexpected data in the latest round of testing. Results that could either validate his concerns about rushing the drug to market or potentially offer a breakthrough that would make the medication safer than anticipated. Either way, he concludes as they pull up to an imposing glass and steel building bearing the Winters Pharmaceuticals logo. Your clinical perspective will be valuable. These researchers are brilliant scientists, but few of them have ever watched a child struggle through an asthma attack. The security process is thorough, retinal scans, ID badges, and visitor protocols that remind Emma this is no ordinary workplace. Alexander is greeted with deference by everyone they pass, though Emma notices some curious glances directed her way. Not your usual guest? She asks quietly as they enter an elevator. Alexander's lips quirk into a half-smile. Let's just say I don't typically bring Sophie's caregivers to high-level research meetings. The research facility occupies 3 floors of the building, with state-of-the-art laboratories, testing facilities, and conference rooms. Alexander leads Emma through a series of increasingly secure areas until they reach a large laboratory where several white-coated scientists are gathered around computer displays. Dr. Chen, Alexander calls to a petite woman with silver-streaked black hair. This is Emma Carter, the pediatric nurse I mentioned. Dr. Chen turns, her intelligent eyes assessing Emma quickly behind stylish glasses. Ms. Carter, a pleasure. Alexander says you have extensive experience with pediatric asthma cases. 7 years in the pediatric ICU at Metropolitan General, Emma confirms, including emergency interventions for severe asthma attacks. Dr. Chen nods approvingly. Excellent. We could use your practical insights on these latest results. She turns to Alexander. Your mother and Mr. Sloan have already arrived. They're waiting in the conference room. Alexander's expression tightens almost imperceptibly. I wasn't expecting them until the formal presentation this afternoon. Ms. Sloan indicated it was at your request, Dr. Chen says, looking confused. Did she now? Alexander murmurs, his tone making it clear this was Victoria's invention. Well, we shouldn't keep them waiting. Emma, would you like to see the laboratory first, or shall we head straight to the lion's den? The laboratory, please, Emma says decisively. I'd like to understand what I'm walking into. Dr. Chen gives her an approving look and leads them through the facility, explaining the development process for the new medication, a revolutionary approach that targets the underlying inflammation in asthmatic airways rather than simply treating the symptoms of an attack. The problem, Dr. Chen explains, showing Emma microscopic images of cellular responses, is that in approximately 8% of our test subjects, we're seeing an unexpected immune response. It's not dangerous, but it reduces the effectiveness of the medication in those cases. And the board wants to proceed despite this issue? Emma asks. 8% is within acceptable parameters for most medications, Dr. Chen says carefully, her tone neutral, but her expression troubled. But for a medication targeting children with severe asthma, even a small percentage represents children who won't be helped, Emma finishes for her. Children who might be given false hope by a medication that won't work for them. Precisely, Alexander agrees. And without further testing, we won't know how to identify which patients might fall into that 8% ahead of time. Dr. Chen leads them to a final station where a younger scientist is monitoring a complex sequence of tests. This is where we had the breakthrough yesterday, she explains. Dr. Kim has identified a potential biomarker that might allow us to predict which patients would experience the reduced effectiveness. Dr. Kim, a serious young man with intense focus, walks them through his findings, complex scientific data that stretches the limits of Emma's medical knowledge. But the implications are clear. With further research, they might develop a companion diagnostic test that would identify patients for whom the medication would be less effective. This would address my primary concern, Alexander says thoughtfully. If we can reliably identify the 8% before treatment, doctors could recommend alternative therapies immediately rather than waiting for treatment failure. But it would delay the release by at least 18 months, Dr. Chen points out. The board will not be pleased. The board's pleasure is not my primary concern, Alexander replies evenly. Patient outcomes are. Armed with this new understanding, they make their way to the conference room where Eleanor Winters, Richard Sloan, and Victoria are waiting. The tension in the room is palpable as they enter. Eleanor rises from her seat at the head of the table, a position that should rightfully belong to Alexander as CEO. How kind of you to finally join us, she says, her tone frosty. And you've brought Miss Carter. How unconventional. Ms. Carter is here at my request as a healthcare professional with direct experience treating pediatric asthma patients, Alexander says firmly, taking his place at the opposite end of the table. Her insights will be valuable to our discussion. Richard Sloan, a distinguished-looking man in his 60s, regards Emma with barely disguised skepticism. While we appreciate your hands-on experience, Ms. Carter, this is a discussion about complex pharmaceutical development and market strategies. Emma meets his gaze steadily. And those pharmaceuticals will eventually be administered by nurses like me to children like those I treat every day. Perhaps that perspective has value in your discussions. Victoria smirks slightly. How dedicated of you to take time away from your childcare duties to join us. Before Emma can respond, Alexander interjects smoothly. Dr. Chen, would you please bring everyone up to speed on Dr. Kim's discovery? The next hour is a tense back and forth as Dr. Chen presents the new findings. Eleanor and Richard repeatedly emphasize market opportunities and competitive advantages, while Alexander focuses on patient outcomes and ethical considerations. Victoria occasionally interjects with pointed questions that seem designed to undermine Dr. Chen's presentation. When Dr. Chen finishes, Richard Sloan leans forward, steepling his fingers. While Dr. Kim's discovery is certainly interesting, it doesn't change the fundamental calculus. Even with the current formulation, 92% of patients would receive benefit. That's an exceptional success rate in pharmaceutical terms. For a headache medication, perhaps, Alexander counters, But we're talking about a life-threatening condition primarily affecting children. Are you comfortable telling parents there's an 8% chance this expensive medication won't help their child? But we won't know until they try it? The market will not wait 18 months for perfection, Alexander, Eleanor says sternly. While you delay, our competitors advance. Millerson Pharmaceuticals is only 6 months behind us in development. So this is about beating Millerson to market, Alexander asks, his voice dangerously quiet. Not about developing the best possible treatment for patients like Sophie? Eleanor's expression hardens. Don't you dare question my concern for my granddaughter. Everything I've done has been to secure this company's future. Sophie's inheritance. What good is an inheritance built on compromised principles, Alexander challenges. Father would never have rushed a medication to market knowing we could make it better. Your father isn't here, Eleanor snaps, and his idealism nearly bankrupted us twice. I had to make the hard decisions. He couldn't. The room falls silent at this revelation. Alexander looks genuinely shocked, as if hearing something previously unknown to him. Emma glances between mother and son, sensing decades of conflict distilled into this moment. She remains silent, aware that she's witnessing a family dispute as much as a business disagreement. Richard Sloan clears his throat, breaking the tense silence. Perhaps we might find a compromise. What if we proceed with the current formulation while simultaneously developing the companion diagnostic test? We could update protocols once the test is available. Alexander shakes his head. And in the meantime, what happens to the patients for whom the medication doesn't work? They and their families waste precious time and resources on an ineffective treatment when they could be pursuing alternatives. May I speak? Emma asked quietly. All eyes turn to her with varying degrees of surprise. Eleanor looks particularly affronted at her presumption, but Alexander nods encouragingly. As a nurse who has held children during severe asthma attacks, Emma begins, her voice steady despite her racing heart, I can tell you that parents would wait any amount of time for a medication that truly works. They would rather have certainty than false hope. She turns to face Eleanor directly. Mrs. Winters, I understand your concern for the company's success, but imagine telling Sophie that her medication might not work, but you won't know until she tries it, when you could have waited to be certain. What would that do to her trust in you, in medicine, in the entire healthcare system? Eleanor's expression remains impassive, but something flickers in her eyes, perhaps recognition, perhaps merely irritation at being challenged. Furthermore, Emma continues, addressing the entire table. From a practical nursing perspective, a medication with a companion diagnostic test would actually have a significant market advantage. Healthcare providers would prefer to prescribe treatments they can be confident will work for specific patients. Victoria smiles thinly. How fascinating to get the perspective of someone who administers medications rather than develops them. But surely you understand that these business decisions involve factors beyond the individual patient experience. I understand perfectly, Emma replies evenly. I understand that this isn't just a business decision. It's a decision that will affect real children's lives. Children like Sophie. At the mention of his daughter, Alexander's expression softens momentarily before hardening with resolve. Dr. Chen, what is your professional recommendation based on the new data, sir? Chen straightens, clearly appreciating being asked for her expert opinion. From a scientific perspective, pursuing the companion diagnostic is the responsible course of action. It would result in a superior product and potentially set a new standard for personalized asthma treatment. Then that's my decision, Alexander says firmly. We will delay market release until the companion diagnostic is ready. Dr. Chen, I want a comprehensive development plan on my desk by the end of the week. Eleanor stands abruptly. This isn't over, Alexander. The board will have something to say about this. The board can say whatever they like, Alexander replies calmly. But as CEO and majority shareholder, the final decision rests with me. Eleanor turns her cold gaze to Emma. You've made a powerful enemy today, Miss Carter. I don't know what you hope to gain by encouraging my son's misguided idealism, but I can assure you it won't end well. With that, she sweeps from the room, Richard Sloan following closely behind after giving Alexander a disappointed look. Victoria lingers, placing a hand on Alexander's arm. Alex, you're making a mistake, she says softly. Eleanor is furious, and my father won't continue to invest in a company that prioritizes perfectionism over profit. Then he can sell his shares, Alexander replies, gently removing her hand. I won't compromise on this, Victoria. After Victoria reluctantly departs, only Alexander, Emma, and Dr. Chen remain in the conference room. Dr. Chen gives Alexander a respectful nod. For what it's worth, I believe you have made the right decision. Your father would be proud. When they're finally alone, Alexander exhales deeply, the tension visibly draining from his shoulders. Well, that was about as pleasant as I expected. I'm sorry if I overstepped, Emma says, suddenly uncertain. I didn't mean to make things worse between you and your mother. Alexander shakes his head, a wry smile forming. Things have been worse between my mother and me since my father died. This is just the latest battle in an ongoing war. He regards Emma with genuine appreciation. Thank you for speaking up. Your perspective was exactly what was needed in that room full of spreadsheets and market projections. I meant what I said, Emma tells him. From a clinical perspective, a medication with a companion diagnostic test would be vastly superior for patients and providers alike. I know you did, Alexander says softly. That's what makes you so valuable. You speak from genuine conviction, not calculation. Their eyes meet, and Emma feels that same connection she experienced in the kitchen the previous night, a moment of recognition between two people who share core values despite their different worlds. The moment is interrupted by Alexander's phone buzzing with a notification. He checks it with a frown. My mother has called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. He sighs, running a hand through his hair. The battle continues. Will you be all right? Emma asks, concerned by the weariness in his expression. This isn't my first showdown with Eleanor Winters, he assures her with a tight smile. But I admit she seems particularly determined this time. He glances at his watch. We should head back. I promised Sophie we'd have dinner together tonight. The drive back to the house is quieter than the morning journey, both Emma and Alexander lost in their thoughts. Emma replays the confrontation, wondering if she's made a powerful enemy in Eleanor Winters and what that might mean for her position in the household. As if reading her thoughts, Alexander says suddenly, Don't worry about my mother's threats. Your job is secure as long as you want it. It's not my job I'm worried about, Emma admits. It's the position I've put you in with your family and board. Alexander glances at her briefly before returning his eyes to the road. You didn't put me anywhere I wasn't already heading. If anything, you helped clarify my resolve. He pauses, then adds more softly, Having someone who understands and supports my position means more than you know. When they arrive home, Sophie greets them exuberantly, eager to hear about their day at the medicine factory, as she calls it. Over dinner, Alexander describes the laboratories in child-friendly terms, while carefully avoiding any mention of the conflict with Eleanor. After Sophie is tucked in for the night, Emma finds Alexander in his study, reviewing documents for the next day's board meeting. He looks up when she knocks lightly on the open door. You should get some rest, she says, noticing the strain around his eyes. Tomorrow sounds like it will be challenging. Alexander sets aside his papers with a sigh. You're right. I'm just trying to prepare for every possible argument Eleanor might make. May I ask you something? Emma says, entering the study but remaining standing. Your mother mentioned that your father's idealism nearly bankrupted the company twice. What did she mean? Alexander gestures for Emma to sit, leaning back in his chair thoughtfully. My father believed that pharmaceutical companies had a moral obligation to develop medications for conditions affecting vulnerable populations, regardless of profit potential. He invested heavily in treatments for rare pediatric conditions that other companies ignored because the market was too small. That sounds admirable, Emma observes. It was, Alexander agrees, but financially precarious. Twice during his tenure, we faced significant financial challenges because these specialized medications cost a fortune to develop, but served only small patient populations. His expression softens with pride, but he never wavered. He believed that if we did the right thing, the company would survive, and it did. And your mother disagreed with this approach? My mother is a brilliant businesswoman who kept the company afloat during those difficult periods through shrewd financial management, Alexander explains with surprising fairness. She believed then, as she does now, that the company can only help patients if it remains profitable and competitive. It's not that she doesn't care about patients. She simply has a different perspective on how best to serve them. Emma considers this more nuanced view of Eleanor Winters. And where do you stand between these two philosophies? Alexander smiles ruefully. Somewhere in the middle, I hope. I believe in my father's ethical vision, but I also understand my mother's practical concerns. The challenge is finding the balance, developing medications that truly help patients while ensuring the company remains strong enough to continue its work. That seems like a lonely position, Emma observes, caught between two powerful perspectives. It can be, Alexander admits, his gaze meeting hers with unexpected vulnerability, which is why it means so much to have someone who understands both sides. The moment stretches between them, filled with unspoken connection. Emma feels herself drawn toward Alexander's quiet strength and moral clarity, even as she recognizes the professional boundaries she's rapidly approaching. Before either can speak again, the study phone rings, the private line that only a select few people have access to. Alexander answers it with a frown that quickly deepens as he listens. When? He asks tensely. How severe? Yes, I understand. Thank you for calling directly. He hangs up, his expression grave. That was Dr. Chen. Someone accessed the laboratory systems after hours and downloaded all the research data on the new asthma medication, including Dr. Kim's recent discoveries. Emma gasps. Corporate espionage? Possibly, Alexander says grimly. Or internal sabotage. Only someone with high-level clearance could access those systems. He doesn't need to spell out the implication. Someone on his own board might be working against him. What will you do? Emma asks. I've activated our security protocols and legal team, Alexander says, already reaching for his phone. But the damage may already be done. If this data reaches our competitors, especially Millerson Pharmaceuticals, they could develop the companion diagnostic first, Emma realizes, and beat you to market with the complete solution. Alexander nods, his expression hardening. Exactly, and I have a sinking feeling I know who might be behind this. The next morning arrives with a tension that permeates the house. Alexander left before dawn for emergency meetings with his security team and legal counsel, leaving Emma to explain his absence to a disappointed Sophie. Daddy had an important work emergency, Emma tells her, as they prepare for school, but he promised to be home for dinner tonight. Sophie nods solemnly. Grandma Eleanor is probably making trouble again. She doesn't like it when Daddy does the right thing instead of the money thing. Emma is once again struck by the child's perceptiveness. Your daddy is very brave to stand up for what he believes in. You're brave too, Sophie says matter-of-factly, as Emma helps her into her coat. Daddy said you stood up to Grandma Eleanor yesterday and weren't scared at all. Emma smiles, touched that Alexander had spoken about her to Sophie. Everyone gets scared sometimes, Sophie. Being brave means doing what's right even when you're afraid. After seeing Sophie off to school with the driver, Emma returns to find Mrs. Jenkins waiting for her in the kitchen, her expression even more pinched than usual. There's someone here to see you, the housekeeper says disapprovingly. I told her Mr. Winters is not at home, but she insists on speaking with you specifically. Confused, Emma follows Mrs. Jenkins to the formal living room, where a middle-aged woman in a conservative suit waits. She rises when Emma enters, extending her hand professionally. Miss Carter? I'm Judith Morgan, private investigator. I was hoping we might have a conversation. Emma shakes the woman's hand cautiously. What is this regarding? I've been retained by Mrs. Eleanor Winters to conduct a thorough background check on you, Ms. Morgan explains without preamble. Standard procedure for someone in your position of trust with the Winters family. Emma feels a chill despite the warm room. I've already completed background checks as part of my employment agreement with Mr. Winters. Mrs. Winters has requested a more comprehensive investigation, Ms. Morgan says, her tone neutral but her implication clear, including your family history, financial records, and previous employment details. The threat is thinly veiled. Eleanor is looking for dirt, anything she can use against Emma. I have nothing to hide, Ms. Morgan, Emma says evenly, but I find the timing of this investigation interesting, coming immediately after yesterday's meeting. Ms. Morgan's expression reveals nothing. I'm simply doing my job, Ms. Carter. Mrs. Winters is concerned about her son and granddaughter's welfare. Is she? Emma challenges quietly. Or is she concerned about my influence on Alexander's business decisions? For the first time, Ms. Morgan's professional demeanor cracks slightly, showing a hint of sympathy. My advice, be careful. The Winters family operates in a world where corporate politics and family dynamics are dangerously intertwined. Whatever your intentions, you've positioned yourself at the center of a power struggle that began long before you arrived. With that warning, she hands Emma a business card. I'll be in touch to schedule a formal interview. In the meantime, if there's anything in your background you'd like to disclose proactively, now would be the time. After the investigator leaves, Emma sits alone in the living room, turning the business card over in her hands. Eleanor's message couldn't be clearer. She views Emma as a threat to be neutralized. The question is how far she's willing to go. Emma's phone buzzes with a text from Alexander. Board meeting running long. Security confirmed data breach originated from inside. We'll fill you in tonight. How's Sophie? Emma replies reassuringly about Sophie, but hesitates to mention the investigator's visit via text. This is a conversation better had in person. The day passes slowly, with Emma keeping herself busy with household tasks and preparations for Sophie's return from school. When Sophie arrives home, she's bubbling with excitement about a class project, temporarily distracting Emma from her concerns about Eleanor's investigation. They're working on homework in the kitchen when Mrs. Jenkins appears in the doorway. Ms. Carter, there's a package for you. Emma accepts the small envelope with confusion. She hasn't ordered anything, and few people know her current address. Inside is a flash drive and a handwritten note. What Eleanor doesn't want you to know. A friend. Her heart racing, Emma pockets the flash drive, deciding to examine it privately later. She has no idea who might have sent it or what it contains, but the cryptic message suggests information that could be significant to her increasingly complicated situation. When Alexander finally returns home that evening, he looks exhausted but resolute. He greets Sophie with forced cheerfulness, listening to her school stories over dinner with genuine interest despite his obvious preoccupation. After Sophie is in bed, Emma joins Alexander in his study, the flash drive heavy in her pocket. How did the board meeting go? She asks, closing the door behind her. About as well as could be expected, Alexander says wearily, pouring himself a small whiskey. The board is split on how to proceed with the medication development, though most agree the data breach is the more immediate concern. Do you know who is responsible? Alexander's expression darkens. We've narrowed it down to someone with executive-level access. The list is short: myself, my mother, Richard, Sloan, Victoria, and our chief of research, Dr. Mercer. He takes a sip of his drink. Obviously, I didn't steal my own research. Dr. Mercer has dedicated his career to this project and would have nothing to gain. That leaves 3 prime suspects. Your mother, Richard, or Victoria, Emma concludes. Do you really think one of them would betray the company like that? Alexander sets down his glass, looking troubled. A week ago, I would have said no without hesitation. But now? He shakes his head. My mother is ruthless in business, but I've never known her to cross ethical lines this severely. Richard has close ties to Millerson Pharmaceuticals through various investments, but industrial espionage would destroy his reputation if discovered. And Victoria? Victoria is ambitious and firmly in my mother's camp regarding the company's direction, Alexander says carefully. But she's built her career at Winters. Sabotaging our research would ultimately harm her own future. Emma hesitates, then decides to share her own news. Your mother sent a private investigator to see me today. She's conducting a comprehensive background check on me. Alexander's expression hardens. I'm sorry, Emma. My mother is thorough when she perceives a threat. I'll speak to her immediately. That's not all, Emma continues, removing the flash drive from her pocket. I received this anonymously today. The note says it contains information Eleanor doesn't want me to know. Alexander stares at the small device. Have you looked at it? Not yet. I wanted to show you first. Alexander hesitates, clearly torn between curiosity and caution. It could be a trap, malware designed to access our home network, or fabricated information meant to create distrust. Or it could be legitimate, Emma points out, someone trying to help. After a moment's consideration, Alexander retrieves a laptop from his desk drawer. This is an isolated system not connected to any networks. We can check it safely. They insert the flash drive and Alexander navigates through security protocols to access its contents. The drive contains a single folder labeled Carter Winters Connection. Inside are medical records, not Emma's, but her mother's. Pages of treatment histories, medication prescriptions, and hospital visits spanning over 20 years. And on every page, a familiar logo, Winters Pharmaceuticals. My mother was part of a clinical trial, Emma realizes, scanning the documents, for an early asthma medication developed by your company. Alexander looks increasingly troubled as he reviews the documents. This was one of my father's special projects, a treatment for severe therapy-resistant asthma. I remember it vaguely from my childhood. Emma continues reading, her heart sinking as she reaches the final documents. The medication was discontinued after phase 2 trials showed dangerous side effects in a small percentage of patients. She looks up at Alexander, her voice barely above a whisper. My mother was one of those patients. Her lung function decreased significantly after joining the trial. Alexander closes his eyes briefly, the weight of this revelation visible in his expression. I'm so sorry, Emma. I had no idea. Neither did I, Emma says honestly. My mother never mentioned being part of a clinical trial. She always said her asthma was just particularly severe. Alexander scrolls through additional documents, stopping at a legal agreement. There was a settlement, he says quietly. Your mother was compensated for her declining health in exchange for signing a non-disclosure agreement about the trial's negative outcomes. Emma feels a complex mix of emotions, shock at discovering this connection to the Winters family, anger that her mother's condition might have been exacerbated by an experimental drug, confusion about why this information would be sent to her now. Who would have access to these records, she asks. Very few people, Alexander says grimly. These are sealed legal documents from over 20 years ago. My father would have known, and my mother as CFO at the time would have approved the settlements. He looks up at Emma, his expression troubled. Emma, you have to consider the possibility that my mother knew about your connection to our company from the beginning. The implication hits Emma like a physical blow. You think she knew who I was that night at the train station? That's impossible. Even I didn't know about this connection. Perhaps not the specific details, Alexander concedes, but she might have recognized your name from the legal documents. The timing of this anonymous disclosure immediately after you opposed her at the board meeting. He doesn't finish the sentence, but his meaning is clear. Emma stands up, needing to move as she processes this information. If that's true, why wouldn't she have said something immediately? Why wait until now? Because now you're a threat, Alexander says simply. You've influenced my decision about the new medication, sided with me against her business interests. This could be her way of suggesting you have a personal vendetta against Winters Pharmaceuticals because of what happened to your mother. Emma turns to face him, suddenly uncertain. Do you believe that? That I've been somehow seeking revenge all along? Alexander doesn't hesitate. No, your concern for Sophie and your professional insights about the medication are genuine. Whatever happened with your mother's case, I know you aren't using your position here to settle old scores. His confidence in her character is touching, but Emma can't shake a growing sense of unease. But others might believe it, especially if Eleanor presents it that way to the board. Precisely, Alexander agrees grimly. This could be preparation for discrediting you, and by extension, my decision to delay the medication release. Emma sinks back into her chair, feeling suddenly overwhelmed by the complexity of the situation she's found herself in. What began as a straightforward job offer on a snowy night has evolved into corporate intrigue, family power struggles, and now a personal connection to Winters Pharmaceuticals she never knew existed. What do we do now? She asks quietly. Alexander considers the question carefully. First, we need to verify these documents independently. I'll have our legal department pull the original files discreetly. He takes Emma's hand, his touch reassuring. Whatever we discover, Emma, this doesn't change anything between us. I trust you, and your place in this household is secure. The warmth of his hand around hers provides comfort, but Emma can't help wondering if anything will ever be simple again. The professional boundaries she's tried to maintain seem increasingly irrelevant in the face of these personal and professional entanglements. There's something else we need to consider, Alexander says reluctantly. If my mother is behind this disclosure, it suggests she's willing to go to extraordinary lengths to undermine your influence. You should be prepared for more revelations or accusations. What could she possibly reveal? Emma asks. I've been honest about my background, Alexander's expression is sympathetic but serious. Everyone has vulnerabilities, Emma. Financial struggles, past relationships, career setbacks, anything that could be framed in a negative light. My mother is expert at finding and exploiting such weaknesses. Emma thinks of her financial troubles, her mother's death, the crushing student debt that led to her eviction, all parts of her life that Eleanor could potentially weaponize against her. I won't be intimidated, she says firmly. If your mother thinks she can scare me away with investigations and veiled threats, she's underestimated me. Alexander smiles, genuine admiration in his eyes. I believe she has. But be careful, Emma. Eleanor Winters didn't build and maintain her position in a cutthroat industry by being easily outmaneuvered. Their conversation is interrupted by the sound of Sophie calling out, not in distress but with the particular tone she uses when waking from a dream. Emma rises immediately. I'll check on her. You should get some rest. You look exhausted. Alexander nods gratefully. Thank you. And Emma? We'll figure this out together. Emma finds Sophie sitting up in bed, her room illuminated by the soft glow of her nightlight. Bad dream, sweetheart? She asks, sitting on the edge of the bed. Sophie shakes her head. Not bad, just strange. I dreamed you and Daddy and I were in a boat, but Grandma Eleanor was making waves to tip us over. The child's subconscious perception of the household tensions is remarkably accurate, Emma thinks with concern. That does sound strange, but you know what? In real life, boats are built to handle waves. That's what makes them strong. Sophie considers this, then nods seriously. Our boat was really strong. Daddy was steering, and you were helping me not be scared of the water. That sounds like a good team, Emma says, smoothing Sophie's hair. Now, do you think you can go back to sleep? Will you stay until I fall asleep? Sophie asks, her voice small. Sometimes I worry you might disappear during the night, like Mommy did. Emma's heart clenches at the child's lingering insecurity. I'll stay, she promises, taking Sophie's small hand in hers, and I'll be here in the morning too. As Sophie drifts back to sleep, Emma reflects on the complicated web she's found herself in. The discovery of her mother's connection to Winters Pharmaceuticals raises questions she never thought to ask. About her mother's illness, about the circumstances that brought her to that train platform on a snowy night, about Eleanor Winters' possible role in it all. But looking at Sophie's peaceful face, Emma knows one thing with certainty. Whatever challenges lie ahead, this child's well-being remains her priority. If standing up to Eleanor Winters is what it takes to protect Sophie and Alexander, then that's exactly what she'll do. When she returns to the hallway, Emma is surprised to find Alexander waiting outside Sophie's room. Is she all right? He asks quietly. Yes, just a strange dream, Emma assures him. She's asleep again now. Alexander nods, relief evident in his expression. Thank you for being so good with her. She's never bonded with anyone the way she has with you. In the dimly lit hallway, with Sophie sleeping peacefully nearby and the house quiet around them, the professional distance between employer and employee seems to evaporate. Emma is acutely aware of Alexander's proximity, of the concern in his eyes that extends beyond mere appreciation for her childcare skills. Alexander, she begins hesitantly, about this situation with your mother and the company. It's complicated, he acknowledges with a rueful smile. And I've dragged you into the middle of it. I'm sorry for that. You haven't dragged me anywhere, Emma corrects him gently. I chose to speak up at that meeting because I believed it was right for patients like Sophie and for your company's integrity. Alexander studies her face in the soft hallway light, his expression softening. Do you know how rare that is? Someone who makes choices based on principle rather than self-interest or expediency? I think you do the same, Emma observes. That's why you're fighting so hard for this medication to be developed properly, even at personal cost. Their eyes meet, and in that moment, the connection between them transcends their professional relationship. Alexander takes a half step closer, his hand lightly touching her arm. Emma, he says softly, his voice rougher than usual, I need you to know something. Whatever happens with the company, with my mother's investigations, with this medication, I'm grateful you came into our lives, not just for Sophie's sake, but for mine as well. The sincerity in his voice makes Emma's heart race. She's aware they're standing at a threshold, not just of Sophie's bedroom, but of a fundamental change in their relationship. One step forward would cross a line that might be impossible to retreat from. Before either can make that decision, Alexander's phone buzzes insistently in his pocket. He checks it with a grimace. Security alert at the lab. I need to take this. The moment breaks as he steps back, professional responsibility reasserting itself. We'll talk more tomorrow. Good night, Emma. Good night, she replies, watching him walk toward the stairs, their almost moment suspended in the space between them. As Emma prepares for bed, she can't help but reflect on the day's revelations and their implications. The flash drive containing her mother's medical records sits on her bedside table, a tangible link between her past and present that raises more questions than it answers. Who sent it, and why now? Is it genuinely meant to warn her about Eleanor's knowledge, or is it part of a more complex manipulation? And most importantly, how will this newfound connection to Winters Pharmaceuticals affect her growing attachment to Alexander and Sophie? Sleep comes fitfully, her dreams filled with documents she can't quite read and waves threatening to capsize a small boat where Sophie calls for her help. When she wakes the next morning, Emma feels a renewed determination. Whatever Eleanor Winters has planned, whatever complications lie ahead, Emma won't be easily driven away from the family that has come to mean so much to her. She's just finishing getting dressed when her phone rings with an unfamiliar number. Against her better judgment, she answers. Ms. Carter, a woman's voice says, this is Judith Morgan again. I think we need to meet urgently. There's something you should know about Eleanor Winters and your mother. Emma hesitates only briefly before agreeing to meet Judith Morgan at a small coffee shop several blocks from the Winters home. She leaves a note for Mrs. Jenkins explaining that she's running an errand and will be back before Sophie returns from school. The private investigator is already seated at a corner table when Emma arrives, a manila folder placed neatly beside her coffee cup. She rises slightly as Emma approaches. Thank you for meeting me, she says, gesturing for Emma to sit. I realize this is unusual. Emma remains wary. Why the urgency, and why meet away from the house? Judith glances around the quiet cafe before speaking. Because what I'm about to tell you puts my professional ethics in a gray area. Mrs. Winters hired me to investigate you, but in the process I uncovered information she likely wouldn't want revealed. Emma studies the woman across from her. Why tell me then? Isn't your loyalty to your client? My loyalty is to the truth, Judith says simply, and to preventing potential harm when I see it coming. I've been in this business 30 years, Miss Carter. I know when someone's being set up. She slides the folder across the table. Eleanor Winters didn't just hire me after your confrontation at the board meeting. She's had me tracking you for weeks, since before you ever met Alexander at that train station. Emma feels the blood drain from her face. That's impossible. How would she even know who I was? Because she's been monitoring your mother's case for years, Judith explains, tapping the folder. These are surveillance reports dating back 6 months. Eleanor had you under observation long before you and Alexander supposedly coincidentally met. With shaking hands, Emma opens the folder. Inside are photographs of her at the hospital, entering her apartment building, even sitting at her mother's grave. Reports detail her financial struggles, her work schedule, her routine, a comprehensive documentation of her life before the night at the train station. I don't understand, Emma whispers, feeling violated by this invasion of her privacy. Why would she do this? That's what troubled me, Judith says, leaning forward. At first, I assumed she was simply being overprotective of her son and granddaughter, conducting due diligence after the fact. But these reports predate your employment. And there's more. She pulls out another document, an email exchange between Eleanor and Richard Sloan. Subject, Carter Contingency Plan. Emma reads aloud, her voice growing unsteady. Richard, the nurse is perfect for our purposes. Financial troubles. Emotional vulnerability, due to recent loss, strong caregiving instincts. Alexander will respond to all these qualities. Have her landlord proceed with the eviction as discussed. Ensure she has no viable alternatives. The storm forecast for Tuesday provides optimal conditions for their chance meeting. Emma looks up, stunned. They orchestrated everything? The eviction, the meeting at the train station? All of it was planned? Judith nods grimly. It appears so, though Alexander himself seems to have been an unwitting participant. The plan was for you to become a trusted member of the household, then gradually influence Alexander toward accelerating the medication's release. But that's exactly the opposite of what I did, Emma points out, confusion mingling with horror. Yes, Judith agrees. That's where their plan seems to have backfired. They didn't anticipate your actual ethics or the genuine connection you would form with Sophie and Alexander. She pauses, studying Emma's reaction, or the fact that you'd stand on principle against rushing an asthma medication to market. Emma's mind races to process this revelation. So when I opposed Eleanor at the board meeting, you became a liability rather than an asset, Judith finishes. Hence the sudden deep background check, the anonymous flash drive revealing your mother's connection to Winters Pharmaceuticals, all attempts to discredit you or pressure you to leave. Why are you showing me this? Emma asks, still struggling to comprehend the scope of the manipulation. Judith sits back, her professional demeanor giving way to genuine concern. Because I've seen too many good people destroyed in corporate power games. And because there's something else you should know about the data breach at the laboratory. She produces another document, a security report highlighting suspicious access to the company's systems. The breach came from Eleanor Winters' personal computer. She's the one who leaked the research data to create a crisis that would force Alexander to fast-track the medication despite his ethical concerns. Emma stares at the evidence, pieces falling into place. And she'd blame Richard or Victoria, further isolating Alexander from potential allies on the board. Exactly, Judith confirms. It's a masterful plan. Eleanor gets the medication to market quickly, discredits you, and strengthens her control over both the company and her son. She checks her watch. I've said more than I should professionally. What you do with this information is up to you. But I'd advise caution. Eleanor Winters is not someone to confront without preparation. As Judith rises to leave, Emma asks the question that's been forming in her mind. The flash drive with my mother's medical records. That was you, wasn't it? The private investigator offers the barest hint of a smile. Let's just say not everyone agrees with Eleanor's methods, even those on her payroll. Good luck, Ms. Carter. I think Alexander and Sophie Winters are fortunate to have you in their lives. However it came about. After Judith leaves, Emma remains at the table, the folder of evidence before her, trying to process the magnitude of Eleanor's manipulation. Her entire relationship with the Winters family began as an elaborate setup. Yet the connection she's formed with Sophie and Alexander is real, built on genuine care and shared values rather than Eleanor's machinations. The revelation is both devastating and clarifying. Eleanor clearly underestimated Emma's integrity and her growing attachment to both Sophie and Alexander. But now Emma faces an impossible dilemma. Reveal the truth to Alexander, potentially destroying his relationship with his mother and destabilizing the company, or keep this knowledge to herself, allowing Eleanor to continue her manipulations unchecked. By the time Emma returns to the house, her mind is made up. Alexander deserves to know the truth, however painful. But before she can find him, she's greeted by a panicked Mrs. Jenkins. There you are. I've been trying to reach you, the housekeeper exclaims, her usual composure shattered. It's Sophie. The school called. She's had a severe asthma attack and has been taken to Metropolitan General. Emma's personal concerns evaporate instantly. Has Alexander been notified? He's meeting us at the hospital, Mrs. Jenkins says, already grabbing her coat. The car is waiting. The drive to the hospital is a blur of worry and silent prayers. Emma's nursing training helps her maintain outward calm, but inside her heart races with fear for the little girl who has become so precious to her. At Metropolitan General, the very hospital where Emma worked until recently, they're directed to the pediatric intensive care unit. Alexander is already there, his face ashen with worry, as he speaks with a doctor Emma recognizes as Dr. Martinez, head of pediatric pulmonology. Emma, Alexander says with palpable relief when he sees her. Thank God you're here. Dr. Martinez nods in recognition. Nurse Carter, good to see you, though I wish under better circumstances. How is she? Emma asks, professional mode engaging automatically. Stable now, but it was a significant attack, Dr. Martinez explains. Possibly triggered by exercise during PE class, though the severity suggests there might be additional factors. We've administered emergency treatments and she's responding, but we'll need to keep her for observation. Can we see her? Alexander asks, the strain evident in his voice. Dr. Martinez nods. She's been asking for both of you. Just remember, she needs to stay calm. Sophie looks small and vulnerable in the hospital bed, an oxygen mask covering her face and monitoring equipment surrounding her. Her eyes brighten when she sees Emma and Alexander enter the room. "Daddy! Emma!" she says, her voice muffled by the mask. "I got to ride in an ambulance with flashing lights." Alexander moves to her bedside, taking her small hand in his. "You gave us quite a scare, sweetheart." "I'm sorry," Sophie says, her brief excitement fading. "I was playing soccer with Zoe and then my chest got really tight." Emma checks the monitors, her professional assessment confirming what Dr. Martinez reported. Sophie is stable but has experienced a significant attack. She adjusts Sophie's blanket, her touch gentle and reassuring. "You don't need to apologize for getting sick, Sophie," she says softly. "That's never your fault." Sophie's eyes fill with tears. "But now everyone at school saw me being all weird and not breathing right, and Tracy Miller said I was just doing it for attention." Alexander's jaw tightens at this revelation of schoolyard cruelty, but Emma responds with calm understanding. "Tracy Miller doesn't understand asthma," she explains, "and sometimes people say unkind things when they don't understand. But your real friends, like Zoe, know the truth, and they care about you, not what Tracy thinks." Sophie seems comforted by this, but fatigue soon overtakes her. As she drifts into sleep, Alexander and Emma step into the hallway to speak with Dr. Martinez. "I'd like to run some additional tests," the doctor says. "This attack was more severe than her history would suggest. Has she been exposed to any new medications, environments, or stressors recently?" Alexander and Emma exchange a look, both thinking of the tensions in the household. "There have been some family stresses," Alexander admits, "and Sophie is perceptive. She picks up on more than we realize." Dr. Martinez nods. "Emotional stress can absolutely exacerbate asthma symptoms, but I'd still like to rule out other factors. With your permission, I'd like to draw blood for a comprehensive panel." "Of course," Alexander agrees, "whatever Sophie needs." As Dr. Martinez leaves to order the tests, Alexander slumps into a waiting room chair, the weight of worry evident in every line of his body. Emma sits beside him, her own concerns about Eleanor temporarily set aside in the face of Sophie's medical crisis. "She's going to be fine," Emma reassures him. "Dr. Martinez is excellent, and Sophie's responding well to treatment." Alexander nods, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. "I know, it's just, every time this happens, I'm reminded how fragile she is, how quickly things can change." He looks at Emma, vulnerability clear in his eyes. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been here today." The moment is interrupted by the arrival of Eleanor Winters, her elegant appearance at odds with the sterile hospital environment. "Alexander, I came as soon as I heard. How is she?" "Stable," Alexander replies, his tone cooling noticeably. "She's resting now." Eleanor notices Emma and her expression tightens. "Miss Carter, still inserting yourself into family matters, I see." Before Alexander can respond, Dr. Martinez returns with a clipboard. "Mr. Winters, I need your signature for these tests." And he stops, recognizing Eleanor. "Mrs. Winters, I didn't realize you were here as well." "Dr. Martinez," Eleanor acknowledges with a nod, "I trust my granddaughter is receiving the best care." "Of course," the doctor assures her. "We're running comprehensive tests to determine what might have triggered this severe attack." He hesitates, then adds, "Actually, since you are both here, there's something unusual in Sophie's preliminary blood work. We've detected traces of a compound not typically found in children her age." Alexander straightens, instantly alert. "What kind of compound?" "It appears to be a beta receptor modifier," Dr. Martinez explains. "Similar to compounds used in certain asthma medications, but not one Sophie is currently prescribed." Emma feels a chill of realization. The new medication Winters Pharmaceuticals is developing? Dr. Martinez nods slowly. "The molecular structure is similar to what's been published in research journals about your company's new asthma treatment." Alexander turns to his mother, his expression hardening. "How is that possible? The medication hasn't been approved for pediatric testing yet." Eleanor maintains her composure, though Emma notices a slight tightening around her eyes. "Perhaps there's been a mistake in the testing, or contamination of the sample. We'll run the tests again to be certain," Dr. Martinez says diplomatically. "In the meantime, Mr. Winters, if you could complete these forms." As Alexander follows the doctor to the nurse's station, Emma finds herself alone with Eleanor. The older woman regards her with cold calculation. I underestimated you, Miss Carter, Eleanor says quietly. You were supposed to be an ally, not an obstacle. Emma meets her gaze steadily, the folder of evidence from Judith Morgan heavy in her bag. You orchestrated everything, didn't you? My eviction, the meeting at the train station, all to place me in Alexander's household for your own purposes. Eleanor's eyebrows rise slightly, the only indication of surprise at Emma's knowledge. And yet here you are, enjoying all the benefits of that arrangement while working against me. Ironic, isn't it? What did you do to Sophie? Emma asked directly, suspicion crystallizing into certainty. I would never harm my granddaughter, Eleanor replies, affronted. The dosage was minimal, just enough to demonstrate the medication's efficacy to Alexander. Once he sees how well it works, even in its current formulation, he'll understand the folly of delaying its release. Emma stares at the woman in disbelief. You gave an experimental medication to your own granddaughter without consent? Do you have any idea how dangerous that was? I've reviewed all the test data, Eleanor says dismissively. The risk was negligible compared to the benefit of convincing Alexander to move forward with production. And the severe asthma attack? Was that part of your calculation of negligible risk? Eleanor has the grace to look momentarily discomfited. That was unexpected. The medication should have prevented attacks, not triggered them. Unless Sophie falls into the 8% who experience adverse reactions, Emma points out, anger building in her chest. The very reason Alexander wanted more testing before release. Eleanor's expression hardens. Don't pretend your opposition is purely scientific, Miss Carter. We both know your mother's unfortunate experience with Winters Pharmaceuticals has colored your perspective. My mother? Emma challenges. You mean the clinical trial participant whose health declined after taking one of your experimental medications? The one who signed a non-disclosure agreement in exchange for a settlement that barely covered her medical bills? Pharmaceutical development always involves calculated risks, Eleanor says coolly. Your mother understood that when she volunteered for the trial. Emma shakes her head in disgust. And now Sophie is your latest calculated risk. Does Alexander know about any of this? The surveillance, the orchestrated meeting, the experimental medication you gave his daughter without his knowledge? Alexander understands business necessities, Eleanor begins, but her defense is cut short by Alexander's return. What experimental medication? He asks, his voice dangerously quiet as he looks between Emma and his mother. What are you talking about? The tension in the hallway is palpable as Eleanor attempts to regain her composure. Alexander, we can discuss this later in private. Now isn't the time. Now is exactly the time, Alexander interrupts, his usual controlled demeanor giving way to barely contained fury. Dr. Martinez just confirmed traces of our developmental asthma medication in Sophie's bloodstream. Medication that hasn't been approved for pediatric use. Medication that Sophie should have no access to. His gaze fixes on his mother, unless someone deliberately administered it to her. Eleanor straightens, switching tactics. I did what was necessary. The medication works, Alexander. This minor setback doesn't change that fact. Once the formulation is adjusted, minor setback? Alexander's voice rises. My daughter is in intensive care. She would have had an attack anyway, Eleanor argues. At least this way we gain valuable data that can help refine the medication for children like her. Alexander stares at his mother as if seeing her for the first time. You experimented on my child without my knowledge or consent? Your own granddaughter. For her own good, Eleanor insists, and for the good of millions of children who will benefit once this medication reaches market. Emma watches the devastating realization cross Alexander's face, the understanding that his mother has betrayed his trust in the most fundamental way possible. There's more, Emma says quietly, unable to keep silent any longer. She retrieves the folder from her bag. Your mother has been manipulating both of us from the beginning. Our meeting at the train station wasn't coincidence. She had me under surveillance for months, arranged my eviction, and orchestrated everything to place me in your household. Alexander takes the folder with numb disbelief, scanning the documents within. His expression shifts from shock to pain to cold anger as he absorbs the evidence of his mother's elaborate manipulation. Is this true? He asks Eleanor, his voice barely audible. Eleanor doesn't bother denying the evidence. Everything I've done has been for the company, Alexander. For our family legacy. Your father's idealism nearly destroyed everything we built. I couldn't let your similar tendencies do the same. So you manipulated me, used my concern for Sophie to place someone in our home you thought would influence me toward your perspective. Alexander turns to Emma, anguish clear in his eyes. And you? Were you part of this deception from the beginning? No, Emma says firmly, meeting his gaze. I knew nothing about any of this until today. I was as much a pawn in your mother's game as you were. She hesitates, then adds softly, but what grew between us, my care for Sophie, my respect for you, that's been real from the start. Alexander studies her face, searching for truth, before turning back to his mother. The data breach at the laboratory, was that you too? Eleanor doesn't flinch. Necessary to create urgency. The board was waffling, and our competitors were advancing. Sometimes direct action is required when traditional channels move too slowly. You betrayed the company, Alexander says, his voice hollow with disbelief. Endangered proprietary research. Experimented on my child. All to what? Prove me wrong? Force my hand? To save you from yourself, Eleanor replies, unmoved by his anger. Just as I saved your father from his worst impulses. Someone has to make the hard decisions, Alexander. Someone has to see beyond sentimentality to ensure survival. Before Alexander can respond, Dr. Martinez approaches with urgent purpose. Mr. Winters, we need to speak about Sophie's treatment immediately. Alexander glances at his mother, his expression hardening with resolve. We're not finished, Mother, but Sophie comes first. She always has. He turns to follow Dr. Martinez, pausing only to say to Emma, please stay with her. Don't leave her alone. The unspoken addition, with my mother, hangs in the air between them. Left alone with Eleanor in the sterile hospital hallway, Emma feels the weight of all that's been revealed. The older woman regards her with a mixture of irritation and reluctant respect. You've won this round, Miss Carter, Eleanor says quietly. But understand this, Winters Pharmaceuticals is my life's work. I won't allow it to be destroyed by misguided idealism, not even my son's. This isn't about winning, Emma replies. It's about doing what's right for Sophie, for patients, for the company's integrity. Eleanor smiles thinly. Such certainty in your moral compass. We'll see how well that serves you in the corporate world. With that, she turns and walks away, her heels clicking against the hospital floor with metronome precision. Emma returns to Sophie's room, finding the little girl still sleeping peacefully, her breathing steadier than before. She takes the small chair beside the bed, watching the gentle rise and fall of Sophie's chest, her mind racing with the implications of all she's learned. Her entire relationship with the Winters family began as an elaborate deception, yet the connections formed, the trust built, the genuine care developed, had transcended those manipulative origins. Emma takes Sophie's small hand in hers, marveling at how this child has become so precious to her in such a short time. Alexander returns nearly an hour later, his face drawn with exhaustion, but showing cautious relief. The additional tests show she's responding well to treatment. Dr. Martinez is adjusting her medication to counteract any lingering effects of the experimental compound. He sinks into the chair opposite Emma, Sophie's hospital bed between them. He's also reporting the unauthorized medication administration to the Hospital Ethics Committee and the FDA. There will be investigations, potential legal consequences. He trails off, the full weight of the situation evident in his slumped shoulders. I'm so sorry, Alexander, Emma says softly, about all of it. Your mother's betrayal, Sophie's suffering, the company's crisis. None of this is your fault, he says firmly, meeting her gaze across the sleeping child who connects them. If anything, you're the only one who's been honest throughout this entire situation. Emma shakes her head slightly. Entirely. I should have told you about the flash drive with my mother's medical records as soon as I received it. I was just trying to understand its implications first. I can hardly blame you for caution, given what we now know about my mother's manipulations. Alexander sighs heavily. The irony is, despite her elaborate scheme to place you in our lives for her own purposes, your presence has been the one genuinely positive thing to come from all this. The sincerity in his voice touches Emma deeply. What will you do now? About the company? Your mother? Alexander's expression hardens with resolve. I've already contacted the board members I trust, scheduled an emergency meeting for tomorrow. My mother's actions, corporate espionage, unauthorized human testing, endangering proprietary research, these aren't just ethical violations. They're potentially criminal. She'll be removed from her position pending investigations. That must be incredibly difficult, Emma observes, recognizing the personal pain beneath his professional decisions. It is, Alexander acknowledges. Despite everything, she's still my mother, and she truly believes she was acting in the company's best interests, however misguided her methods. He looks down at Sophie, gently brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. But Sophie has to come first. Her safety, her trust in me as her father, those are non-negotiable. They sit in companionable silence for a while, the beeping of monitors and the soft sound of Sophie's breathing the only interruption. Finally, Alexander speaks again, his voice quieter, more vulnerable. When all this is settled, the company restructuring, the investigations, Sophie's recovery, we should talk about the future. Your future with us, if that's something you want. Emma feels a flutter of hope despite the circumstances. I'd like that very much. Me too, comes a small, sleepy voice from the bed. Sophie's eyes are open, watching them both with drowsy awareness. Can we talk about it now? I vote yes for Emma staying forever. Alexander laughs softly, the sound breaking the tension of the difficult day. Eavesdropping isn't polite, young lady. I wasn't dropping eaves, Sophie protests, her vocabulary charmingly mixed up. They dropped on me while I was sleeping. Emma smiles, squeezing Sophie's hand gently. How are you feeling, sweetheart? Better, Sophie says, pushing herself to a sitting position. My chest doesn't feel tight anymore, but I'm hungry. That's a good sign, Alexander says, relief evident in his voice. I'll ask the nurse what you're allowed to eat. As he steps out, Sophie turns her serious gaze to Emma. I heard you and Daddy talking about Grandma Eleanor. Did she really make me sick? Emma hesitates, unsure how much to reveal to the child. Your grandmother made some mistakes, she says carefully. She thought she was helping, but she made choices that weren't hers to make. That's why you got sick. Sophie considers this with surprising maturity. Grandma Eleanor always thinks she knows best. Daddy says it's because she's been making hard choices for a long time, and sometimes that makes people forget to listen to others. That's very insightful, Emma says, impressed by the child's perception. Will Daddy forgive her? Sophie asks. Emma ponders the question, appreciating Sophie's concern for her family despite her own suffering. I think eventually he might. Forgiveness takes time, especially when trust has been broken. But your daddy loves his mother just like he loves you. Sophie nods solemnly. And you? Do you love my daddy? The directness of the question catches Emma off guard. Before she can formulate a response, Alexander returns with a nurse carrying a tray with juice and crackers. Look what I smuggled past hospital security, he announces with exaggerated conspiracy, diffusing the moment. The next few days pass in a blur of hospital visits, medical consultations, and corporate crisis management. Sophie recovers quickly, her resilient spirit undiminished by the ordeal. Eleanor is removed from her position at Winters Pharmaceuticals pending multiple investigations, though Alexander ensures she's treated with professional dignity throughout the process. A week after Sophie's hospitalization, life begins settling into a new normal. The board has rallied behind Alexander's leadership, impressed by his principled handling of the crisis. Dr. Chen and her team continue their work on the asthma medication with renewed commitment to safety and ethical standards. And within the Winters household, a sense of peace gradually returns. On a sunny spring morning, Alexander finds Emma in the garden she and Sophie have been cultivating since the snow melted. Raised beds of early vegetables and flowers create a patchwork of green against the rich soil. It's coming along beautifully, he observes, admiring their work. Emma smiles, brushing soil from her hands. Sophie has quite the green thumb. These radishes were entirely her project. Alexander sits on the garden bench, patting the space beside him in invitation. I received some news today that I wanted to share with you first. Emma joins him, noting the mix of emotions in his expression. Good news or difficult news? Both, I think, he says. The board has officially approved the extended testing protocol for the asthma medication. We'll develop the companion diagnostic test, as you and Dr. Chen recommended, even though it means delaying market release by 18 months. That's wonderful, Emma says sincerely. Patients will have a much better product in the end. Yes, Alexander agrees. And something else. Catherine called this morning. Emma stills at the mention of Sophie's mother. What did she want? She's heard about Sophie's hospitalization. News travels fast in certain circles. She's concerned and wants to visit. Alexander's expression is complex, mixing past hurt with cautious consideration. I think it might be good for Sophie to see her mother, even briefly, to know that Catherine does care in her own way. Emma nods slowly, pushing aside any personal feelings about the woman who abandoned her daughter. If you think it's best for Sophie, then I support that decision. Alexander takes her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. I wanted to make sure you understood this doesn't change anything between us. Sophie needs stability and love in her daily life, something you provide that Catherine never could. I know, Emma says, squeezing his hand, and I would never stand between Sophie and any relationship with her mother that's healthy for her. Alexander smiles, his expression softening with affection. That's one of the many reasons I've fallen in love with you, Emma Carter. The declaration, though perhaps inevitable given the path their relationship has taken, still catches Emma by surprise. She meets his gaze, seeing the sincerity there. Despite all the manipulation and deception that brought us together, Alexander continues, what's grown between us is real. My feelings for you have nothing to do with my mother's schemes and everything to do with who you are. Your compassion, your principles, your love for Sophie. Emma feels tears prick at her eyes. I've fallen in love with you too, she admits. With both you and Sophie. It happened so gradually and yet so completely that I can hardly remember what my life was like before you. Alexander reaches into his pocket, producing a small velvet box. I know this might seem sudden to the outside world. We've known each other only months, not years. But I feel like we've lived a lifetime of experiences together in that short time. He opens the box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. Emma Carter, you need a home, and I need a mother for my daughter. But more than that, I need you, your strength, your wisdom, your love. Will you marry me and make official what the three of us already know in our hearts? That we're a family? Emma looks at the ring, then at Alexander's hopeful expression, thinking of all the improbable twists of fate, both manipulated and genuine, that led to this moment. Yes, she says simply, her heart full. Yes, I will. Alexander slips the ring onto her finger, then pulls her into a tender kiss, sealing their commitment to each other and to the family they've formed. Their moment is interrupted by the patter of small feet racing across the garden. Did you ask her? Did she say yes? Sophie calls out, unable to contain her excitement any longer. Alexander laughs, opening his arm to include his daughter in their embrace. Yes to both questions. Emma has agreed to marry us. Sophie throws her arms around Emma's neck with delighted abandon. I knew you would. I told Daddy you would say yes because you love us, and we love you, and that's what matters most of all. Emma holds the child close, marveling at the wisdom in her simple statement. Despite all the complexity that brought them together, corporate intrigue, family manipulation, personal loss, Sophie has distilled the truth to its essence. Love is what matters most. 1 year later, the garden where Alexander proposed has been transformed for their wedding. Rows of white chairs face an arbor covered in climbing roses, while Sophie proudly practices her walk down the aisle, her basket of flower petals clutched importantly in her hands. The guests represent their joined worlds: Alexander's corporate colleagues, Emma's friends from the hospital, Sophie's school friends and their parents. Even Eleanor is present, her relationship with Alexander slowly mending, though forever changed by the events of the past year. And in a gesture of grace that surprised everyone, Alexander invited Catherine as well, acknowledging her place in Sophie's life while making clear the boundaries of their new family structure. As Emma prepares in the bedroom that was once her guest suite, she reflects on the improbable journey that brought her here. From homeless nurse to beloved fiancé, from desperate stranger to central figure in the Winters family, her path has been anything but conventional. A knock at the door reveals Sophie, already dressed in her flower girl dress and practically vibrating with excitement. Emma, the guests are all here and Daddy looks so handsome in his suit, and Grandma Eleanor is actually smiling. The little girl twirls, her dress flaring around her. And guess what? I saw Mommy talking with Daddy, and they didn't even look mad at each other. Emma smiles, adjusting Sophie's flower crown. That's wonderful, sweetheart. It's important that the adults who care about you can be kind to each other, even if they don't all live together. Sophie nods sagely. Daddy says families come in all different shapes, and ours is special because we chose each other. That's exactly right, Emma agrees, touched by Alexander's wisdom in explaining their unconventional family to his daughter. When the moment finally arrives for Emma to walk down the aisle, she sees Alexander waiting for her, his expression a mixture of love, pride, and wonder. Beside him stands Sophie, practically bouncing with excitement, her grin wide enough to light the garden. As Emma joins them beneath the rose-covered arbor, Sophie takes both their hands in hers, creating a circle of three, a family formed not by chance or manipulation, but by choice and love. Alexander's vows are simple but profound. Emma, 1 year ago in this garden, I asked you to join our family. Today, before our friends and loved ones, I make that promise official. You came into our lives during a snowstorm, bringing warmth and light when we needed it most. Whatever circumstances brought us together, I know with absolute certainty that you are exactly where you belong, with Sophie and me, now and always. Emma's own vows acknowledge their unusual beginning while celebrating their chosen future. Alexander and Sophie, you offered me shelter when I had nowhere to go, but you've given me so much more. A home in the truest sense, filled with love, trust, and purpose. I promise to cherish both of you, to stand beside you in all circumstances, and to remember always that the most beautiful beginnings can come from the most unexpected moments. After the ceremony, as they greet their guests beneath the warm spring sunshine, Eleanor approaches them, her expression softer than Emma has ever seen it. Congratulations, she says, genuine warmth in her voice despite the reserve that still exists between them. I was wrong about many things, but I was right about one. You do belong in this family, Emma, not for the reasons I originally thought, but for all the right ones. It's as close to an apology as Eleanor Winters is likely to offer, and Emma accepts it with grace. Thank you for being here today. It means a lot to all of us. As Eleanor moves on to speak with other guests, Alexander squeezes Emma's hand. You continue to amaze me with your capacity for forgiveness. Emma smiles, watching Sophie proudly showing her flower girl dress to a group of admiring friends. Life's too short for grudges. Besides, your mother was right about one thing. Everything she did, however misguided, brought me to you and Sophie. For that outcome, I can't truly regret any part of our journey. Later that evening, as the reception winds down and Sophie falls asleep in her grandfather's arms, Alexander pulls Emma away from the remaining guests for a moment of privacy in the quiet of the rose garden. Happy? He asks simply, his arms encircling her waist. Emma looks up at the man who has become her husband, thinking of the little girl who is now officially her daughter, and the home they've created together against all odds. Completely, she answers truthfully, though I still can't believe how it all began. You needing a mother for your daughter, and me needing a home. Alexander smiles, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. Sometimes the simplest arrangements lead to the most profound connections. As they rejoin their guests, Emma reflects that perhaps there is a certain poetry to their story after all. What began as a desperate transaction between strangers on a snowy night transformed into something neither of them could have anticipated. A love story built on shared values, mutual respect, and genuine care. Sophie stirs in her grandfather's arms, reaching sleepily for Emma and Alexander as they approach. Together, they form a tableau of the family they've become. Not perfect, not conventional, but entirely real and deeply loving. In the end, Emma thinks that's all any of them needed. Not just a home or a mother, but a place to belong, people to love, and the chance to build something beautiful together.